So we're excited once again to have everybody here in this format. We think we have a really great set of presenters this morning. And on behalf of Bob McCool and myself, the agent in San Patricio County, we appreciate everybody joining us today for what we believe is going to be a very good program. We also want to recognize our county crops committee that helps in putting together not only this program, but all of the programs that we offer throughout the year. And we greatly appreciate their advice and guidance. They are the group of people that ensure that the programs that we offer the communities of Nueces, San Patricio County and beyond are relevant to the agricultural producers that we serve. And so we greatly appreciate their input and guidance and influence over our programs throughout each of the years. Speaking of other programs that we have coming up, we did want to highlight this program that we have coming up on May the 11th. It's a carbon farming in Texas workshop. If y'all looked at any of the popular press or kept up with anything that's going on in DC, you're aware of the push towards a lot of this policy, and there's a lot of opportunities for some agricultural producers to maybe look at management in a different way, and so there are concerns here in our area about what can be implemented and what could not be successfully implemented. And so we have some long-term studies that have been done over the years, and we're going to have an opportunity to highlight those, as well as get some input on the policy side from Dr. Joe Outlaw. And then I think we have a great presenter to round out the end of this program that we have on this coming Tuesday, Shelby Meyer with the American Farm Bureau, and she's going to highlight some of the current opportunities that are available to producers in regards to some of these carbon sequestration contracts and things like that. And just other opportunities such as the Cotton Trust Protocol and things of that nature as well. So a good program that we hope that you'll be able to join us for on this coming Tuesday as well. And if you haven't signed up, the opportunity to do that, you can see it's bit.ly /carbon farming is the link to go ahead and do that. But encourage y'all to do that. And I'll put that in the text chat if somebody does want to register for that, they'll be able to do so as well. Other programs that we have coming up in the relatively near future, working with Dr. Josh McGinty, the agronomist at the Corpus Christi Research and Extension Center. He's got a grain sorghum technology field day on May the 26th. And he has got all three of the herbicide tolerant grain sorghum traits on display there. And we would encourage y'all to take advantage of that opportunity to join him and look through those technologies that will be presented on May the 26th. And then we also want to highlight the two crop tours that we have going on back to back in San Patricio County on June the 1st. And that's going to be an evening program. I think he'll kick that off around 2:30, 3 o'clock, something like that. And then on June the 2nd in Nueces County, we'll hold our crop tour, and that'll be a morning program. So want to encourage anyone that's interested in participating in any of these programs to do so. The carbon program that I mentioned previously, you have two options to participate in that. You'll be able to participate in it via Zoom, or you'll also be able to participate in it as a live participant in person at the Johnny Calderon building. And we have a couple of sponsors on that program. the Texas Farm Credit and the Texas Corn Producers Board have agreed to be the lunch and break sponsors on that event. So if you have an opportunity to be in Robstown, Texas on the 11th, we certainly hope that you'll be able to join us for that. With that, many thanks to the great slate of speakers that we have on today's program. We look forward to some of the great information that they're going to be able to present to us today as soon as we can. But I think with that, we've kind of got all of our housekeeping issues taken care of, and we can go ahead and move into the program. Nunley is going to give our official welcome, and we greatly appreciate him being here. Mr. Nunley serves as the Executive Director of South Texas Cotton and Grain Association. South Texas Cotton and Grain was founded in 1963 and works with farmers and growers in 33 county area that includes the upper and lower Gulf, coastal bend, and extends westward into the Texas winter garden. Jeff has been an advocate for farmers on a wide range of issues of concern to South Texas producers for 23 years, and I appreciate him giving our opening comments this morning.
Well, thank you, Jason. First of all, good morning to everyone. It's a beautiful morning here in Victoria, and I hope wherever you are, it's a beautiful day also. I looked through the participant list, and I noticed and recognized names from folks in my territory, folks across Texas, and folks across the belt, ranging from as far west as California over to the Carolinas. So this webinar definitely has a very broad reach. If you participated in this webinar last year, you know that we tried to survey the gens to try to identify, if there were some best practices out there and things that worked. And to be honest, it was a good amateur effort, but it did reveal some things. Probably the most important thing it revealed is that there are some people just do a better job than others, and it has to do with their ability to, or their interest in the issue and caring about it and just being diligent. I think we've recognized from the outset that this was an issue that eventually was going to end up getting into producers' pockets. And I think we'll see that as we go through the presentations today, the changes in the loan rate discounts and so forth. And I'm optimistic that as an industry, we can still address this problem. I think, through improved technologies, there may be ways to improve this. And again, the most important thing is, and this was from Daryl Ernst, who heads up the cotton classing division at USDA AMS. He said, education and awareness is probably one of the key components of reducing plastic in cotton. And so seminars like this are very helpful because it gives us an opportunity to see where we're at, see what practices work and where we need to focus and do a better job. We have made some improvements in South Texas, but for whatever reason, I think our numbers are still fairly high compared to other regions in the Cotton Belt. And I don't know the exact explanation of that, as far why that's happening in our region. But all of us that are here, and this is preaching to the people that care. So y'all are part of the solution because y'all are trying to educate yourselves on how to fix this problem. I think as we go forward and work on this, hopefully we'll improve the situation and do better. I appreciate Jason and Bobby putting this seminar together. They put the last one together as well. They've done really good work on that and putting together speakers, and they've done work outside of these seminars as well on this issue. And I appreciate their efforts on reducing plastic and cotton. So with that, Jason, I'm going to turn it back to you to introduce our speakers. But I welcome everyone here. I appreciate your attendance at the meeting today, and I look forward to the presentations today, because like everybody else, I'm learning on this issue as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nunley. I appreciate those opening comments, and it's my pleasure to introduce our next presenter, Lauren Krugman. Lauren is the Manager of Marketing and Processing Technology for National Cotton Council. One of the National Cotton Council's foremost priorities is the continued delivery of contamination-free cotton to U.S. cotton consumers in the global markets. So Lauren's role as Manager of Marketing and Processing Technology, she is instrumental in working to address this issue, and we appreciate her being here to present on this program today. Lauren?
Thank you, Jason, and thank you all for inviting me to join you today, and I'm really looking forward to reviewing some information with everyone. So today I was asked to give a national overview of plastic contamination in 2021. So I'm going to do a little bit of that on our side of things, as well as go into some projects that we have going on in order to help to reduce the contamination. So contamination prevention, we have had an uptick in all types of contamination, so not just plastic, since 2012. However, plastic has been more prevalent in the last probably 5 or so crop years. Within NCC, we have multiple policy statements in order to address contamination and to seek to eliminate contamination. These are located in almost all of them. However, research and education, as well as packaging and distribution, to maintain bale cleanliness and eliminate contamination. So this is a important endeavor for the National Cotton Council, as well as providing education and resources out to our industry. First, I wanted to review the contamination incident report with you all. This is an internal survey that we have available on our website, and this is for any international or domestic mills to use in order to report directly to me, and it remains anonymous if they so choose to. And this is a way for them to tell me about any sort of contamination events that they run into with our bales. And this can go from plastics to they found feathers to oil, anything. And they're able to attach pictures to all of that, as well as PBI lists or any other files that may be relevant to these incidents. And so we collect that information and form a master report on all of this. And so from 2018, we had 16 incidences that were reported. 2019, we had 11 incidences. And then in 2020, so far we've had 4. But just to keep in mind that for those mills that are receiving 2020 crop, that time frame's not quite over yet. So I hope that we don't see any more for 2020, but we're still in the process of collecting those. So just keeping that in mind. So just an overview of kind of what we break our information out into. So we have it separated out into the different types of materials. So you can see everything from various plastics to PET strap to bale bagging, oil, PET bagging, anything of that nature. And we do our very best to determine what that is by using the photos or the documentation that they submit to us. You can see that over the last few years, plastic films and yellow plastic films and those various plastics have reduced, where they were peaked about the 2017 crop year. Again, this is kind of a work in progress for 2020. PET strap has been an increase within the last couple of years. We've had multiple reports from both Cotton Council International, with our representatives there who are relaying information from mills, or even Cotton Incorporated sometimes helps us with some of these reports from what they see. For this information, I do want to note that these are substantiated reports. So we only include numbers in this document if there was actual proof and documentation that was submitted. They had to provide PBI numbers or some sort of proof that these are actually our US cotton bales. If they don't, then we don't record it. Again, we do get pictures, and then sometimes even we'll get samples, and I call them presents whenever I get them in my office, since I'm kind of the main complaint department. So not the best type of presents to get, though. Moving on past what type of materials we get, we also break these reports down into what colors the material is. And so you could see in the past, we had a lot of yellow and black, a lot of blue and green showing up. And as the years progress, that has been dwindling down as well. However, again, that blue and green, the green going back to PET strap, the yellow and the pink still showing up. And again, that's the round module wrap that we see, the film. And again, this data is broken down again by substantiated reports only. So I wanted to include some pictures of what we've received for this 2020 crop year. And this was submitted to us. The next few slides, I've got some examples. So you can see this is just kind of one of their bags from their contamination removal machine, either an Ooster or something along those lines, where they run a set of bales, and this is kind of what they get out. And lots of pink, yellow. You could see some sort of a green twine, some black, looks to be some shopping bag material. It's kind of a mixed bag of everything. We've also received some photos of black mulch, which comes after a vegetable harvest, which is still in the ground and can be picked up by the harvesters, as well as this blue over here, which could be some tarp material or some sort of a plastic twine or anything like that. And I did include some photos. This was not specifically from last crop year, but just as an example of some of the things that like the USDA classing office may see in terms of plastic calls. You can see pink on the left, and then that bit of yellow plastic in the center of that biscuit on the right. Going back to that report, I mentioned that PET strap has been an increasing issue the last few crop years. And this is an example of where that issue comes into play. So this happens whenever a weld it gets too hot, or it's over welded, or it may go for too long, and the plastic ends up creating fibrils and slack, and ends up getting into the bale of cotton on the outside, right around where that PET strap sits. This is especially an issue just because it's so hard to remove once it's in there. And you may think, yes, because it's on the outside, it's easy to brush off. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Those tiny little fibers act exactly like cotton fibers. So they get intertwined within the bale fibers, and it's incredibly hard to remove and get out. This is one of those issues that's a little bit easier to fix than, say, a round module wrap issue. And so this comes down to checking machine calibrations on a regular basis and making sure you're paying, or that the gin is paying close attention to those welds, and making sure that nothing's over welding, or that it's creating, nice, clean, solid welds. And we've talked to the strapping manufacturers to make sure that they're fully aware of this issue, since it has been on the rise in the last 2 years. They are aware. They are working on this issue as well, and they've been testing every step of their process along the way, as well as the parent materials, just to make sure that there's nothing that can be changed to help improve this. With any of the gins that have older strap shoots, they are going around and replacing those with new versions of strapping shoots at gins around the whole cotton belt. And that seems to be really helping with this situation as well. So getting some new shoots on there seems to cut down on that flak that's appearing and overwhelming. But one thing that we've learned with these talks from the strapping manufacturers is that the strap does have a bit of a shelf life. So if you have strap that's over 2 seasons old, we would suggest that maybe you talk to your manufacturer and rotate that out, because older strap can tend to cause more issues than a brand new strap. But I think the most important thing moving forward on this issue is just making sure that you continue to have open communication with your strapping manufacturers. And if you do have any excessive issues with one particular coil of strap, that you go ahead and call them and let them know, and give them the information on that coil, because they're going to be able to go back and look through their process and check through everything that happened on that day when that coil was produced to see if there was any quality issues. And if so, then they're able to reach out to their customers to keep this from happening more than it needs to. So just keeping that communication up, as well as consistent checking on your machinery, and this should be able to be fixed fairly simply. Again, I know more PET strap, but this was quite a strong picture. We don't often see plastic or contamination actually getting into the garments or the final materials. And so I thought this was really important to show, just because it really does show that those fibers act like cotton. And you can see on the left picture, it's intertwined right here into the garment. And this is the strapping material as well. So that was something we don't see very often, and that I wanted to make a point of. Another thing that we don't see in reporting, or we haven't had cases of it, but just another thing that's an easy thing to check on, making sure that all your machinery is clean as possible, that we're not getting any oil or grease inside of the bale press that could potentially get onto the bale. Just another easy thing to check around the gin to help to combat this contamination issue. Going into the round module wrap, we have been in the process of creating a new performance standard, and I'm just going to give a very, very short background on kind of what's going on there, because I think John Wanura will probably touch a little bit more on this since this is kind of his baby. But so TAMA produces two different types of wrap. So they have their premium wrap, which is the yellow or the pink, and then they have their value wrap, which is blue. And this is new. From last season, they released this into all of the regions of the Cotton Belt. The blue is actually incorporated into the Arctic feature and is available for all environments. If you'd want to learn more, we do have a brochure on these different types of wrap, and specifically the new blue wrap located on the NCC website. So this blue value TAMA wrap was developed as a lower cost alternative from the pink and the yellow premium wraps. It can be more susceptible to damage due to less robust construction than the premium wraps, though. So we have to make sure that we're handling it a lot more carefully due to the adhesive layer not being as robust as the premium wraps. So on the premium, you have a full round layer of adhesive. On these blue, it's only a smaller strip of adhesive. Another issue with these is that in their specs, they claim that these can be up to 100-inch diameter as a maximum for the blue wrap, whereas 92 inches is generally considered the maximum for the premium wraps. And as y'all may know, even with the yellow and the pink at 92 inches maximum, you can still run into issues whenever these these round modules are loaded onto module trucks and scrubbing the sidewalls and causing, damage and pinch points, resulting in the wrap fraying or pulling or ripping. So that's something that we've have a cause for concern on. Just with getting a larger diameter, we're looking at even more chance of that happening. So just being mindful of how large you create these modules, to make sure that if you are using a traditional module truck, that we're not scrubbing the sides, causing any damage to these modules that we don't need to. And these also have a higher chance of squatting in the field just because they do run a little bit larger and they have a little bit less robust shape to them. So within the next few years, both of TAMA's patents are going to expire. So one in 2023 and one in 2022. And with those expires happening, we wanted to make sure that we develop a standard for the industry with ASABE to make sure that we're addressing significant concern with any use of poor performing wrap once these patents expire. We had a little bit of an example of that this last few years with the PickSmart wrap, which obviously is causing some major issues. This is something that TAMA is working with them legally because they came into the marketplace when they shouldn't have. But we saw some major issues with this wrap, and we want to make sure that we address these quality concerns moving forward before those patents expire. So a new standard is being developed to address the quality of the round module wraps. We want to make sure that without a standard wrap that these aren't more susceptible to damage. The standard will help the U.S. cotton industry help to promote the use of wrap material that's more robust and less likely to contaminate. And we'll be looking at the combined effects of multi-use layers, attributes such as adhesives that withstand both hot and cold environments, applied tension, length of the module storage in various environments, and other factors such as color. And I'll get into color a little bit later as well. So contamination prevention and JCI BPC policy. So prevention is critical, obviously. This is how we get rid of this, and it's very important. And so some of the steps that NCC has taken in order to help is to revise and update educational material, make sure that we're participating in any contamination awareness and prevention efforts, such as this seminar with growers, ginners, and warehousers. We're closely monitoring those complaints that come in from the mills and the shippers using that internet form that I reported on earlier. And John, I think, who's coming next, will talk a little bit more about this, but I did just want to touch on it because it's so important. So why is this prevention of plastic so important? And it comes down to loss of reputation and loss of market potential, as well as cost for the producer. And it's going to hit hard, especially this year. They just released the discount schedule, and plastic contamination for 71 or 72 is now in the negative 3,000s. So this is a big hit for anyone that gets a call with plastic. We saw this coming from the beginning, but it's just reinforcing the fact that we need to pay very close attention to this and do everything we can to help prevent this plastic contamination before it becomes an issue. But the main concern for us is how many are not called at the plastic or at the classing office. So you may catch one bale out of a run of 10, but which ones have plastic? You don't know until they're opened up at the mill, and that's the big concern. We don't want to lose our customers and our reputation due to plastic contamination. So moving into some prevention efforts and some projects that we have underway. Prevention really starts before the next cotton crop's in the ground. And these are some kind of extreme pictures here of what you may see in a field. But it just goes to show, if at all possible, walk your fields. Make sure that you get any debris or garbage or plastic out of that field before it's planted or before it's harvested, so that you can at least get that step ahead before it actually gets into the module and then has a chance to get into the gin and then finally into the bale. Some of our best management practices and continuing education. So this is something that we've added to over the last few years as we learn more. But the most important thing that we found to prevent plastic contamination is making sure that these modules arrive to the gin undamaged. And by doing that, it greatly reduces the chance of plastic contamination that gets into the bales. So for some management options that we've seen some of the gins and producers do is making a separate pile for your broken and damaged modules that come in and ginning those last. So you don't have any of that potential module wrap getting into the gin system and then running it back through with the good modules. Saving those for last keeps all the contamination potential at the end. Keeping consistent personnel for loading and unloading flatbeds, making sure that you're really careful whenever you pick up those and making sure that you don't have any of the poles stick through the top or come out the sides of the module, again, causing undue contamination and damage to these modules. Keeping a module truck chain bed speed of 1:1 with the ground speed is incredibly important. You don't want to pull or rip at the bottom of these modules, again, causing contamination. Following the recommendations from TAMA on where to cut the wrap. That's incredibly important. If your module wrap opener is something that you can just do one cut and follow along that line, that's the best way possible to do that. Instilling importance to the gin crew and just making sure that they're educated and aware of the situation, that they need to handle these with care and make sure that there's not, anything getting into the system. And then again, all of these are going to vary by gin and by producer, but this is some of the things that we've seen that really seem to make a difference. Another thing that seems to make a really big difference is the camera detections in the gin. And this is something that NCC, as well as the National Cotton Ginners, has been recommending to gins, that they incorporate cameras to assist in detection of plastic. And this was a project from the Cotton Foundation that me and Bill Norman had done, I think it was about 3 years ago now. And we put in some really expensive cameras and some really great lighting systems. And through that project, we found that you really don't have to spend a lot of money in order to get a really good view of your module feeder and your disperser cylinders. Some of these gins use a Nest camera or a home security camera that links up to their phone. And as long as you have a really good light source, you're going to get a good view. Most cameras nowadays run just fine enough for this. USDA did come out with some new documents on some specs for camera systems and the lighting that's required in order to do this. And that's going to be located on our website under the National Cotton Ginners. And if you need to reference any of that, that's available there. But if you don't have a camera system in your gin, or your producer in your gin doesn't have a camera system, we would highly recommend it. It's just a little bit of money to install these and cutting a hole into the module feeder. And it really does help to catch these large pieces of plastic before it frays and gets into the system in tiny little pieces. Along with the cameras, we've also been updating and working on our education video, and this is available on both our website under the Contamination tab, as well as on our YouTube channel under the Contamination playlist. And this is the one that I know, I hope that all of y'all have seen before, but this is the 12 chaptered video, and it goes from all the way to in the field to opening these bales at the gin and every step in between. And this would be a great resource for anyone doing any sort of like staff workshops or grower seminars or ginning seminars, in order to show their respective staff members each of these steps that they may be responsible for. Each chapter ranges from about 3 to 5 minutes, and so it's not very long, but it gives what to look out for, potential problems that you may run into, as well as solutions to those issues and best management practices. So just some updates on this. So since August 2020 was when the video was last updated, and we've had 739 views on the English version, and we do have a Spanish version available as well, and that's had 18 views so far. And if any gin or producer or anyone wants to get a USB or flash drive copy, we can get those out to you as well. Just reach out and we can get those sent. So I'm going to move on to a little bit of bale packaging, but it does have to relate directly back to this contamination issue. So back in 2020, the JCIBPC committee approved a new color for woven polypropylene. So now woven polypropylene bags can be either translucent white, translucent light gold, or translucent light blue, which has to be equivalent to this Pantone 306C color you see on the left. And that is a very important color. Our gin labs took a lot of time and research and development in order to distinguish this color as the best color for camera detection systems. So this ranges from anything like the Viper to the detection systems that you see in mills around the world. This blue color is completely separate off of the spectrum of cotton, and so it really stands out very well. And the purpose and background of changing the woven polypropylene bag color was made for a good faith effort to mills overseas. We were getting complaints in that these mills were cutting our woven polypropylene bag, and strands of the bagging material was actually getting into the cotton. And we've not seen any evidence that that's true. And we've never really seen any evidence at all that our bale packaging is what is contaminating. But again, as an easy solution, cost effective, and that good faith effort to our customers, we went ahead and we did add that color change. And so far, they make for really good looking bales. We've had about 1,350,000 bags placed in the 2020 crop year, which I have to hand it to the bagging manufacturers for making that quick change. This was approved back in April, and they were able to get that many bags out into the marketplace by August. So we were pretty impressed. The feedback we've received from gins and warehouses has been really positive, and we may even look to adding this color to other types of bagging in the future. We did have just a slight manufacturing issue with some of these, again, with that really quick turnaround time. Not all of the manufacturers were able to get that Pantone 306C exactly right. So we did have a little bit of color inconsistency, but that's something that we did address at the last JCIBPC meeting, and we hope to really tighten up those constraints coming into the next year. And as far as I've heard, we will be having quite a few more of those bags in the marketplace coming up into 2021 crop. Another project that we've been working on directly related to contamination is our cotton bale bag project. This was a test that was brought up by a merchant in order to determine the market supply chain acceptance of the fully approved 3-pound cotton bag. And you may not know, but we have had an approved cotton bag on the spec since 1974. This is a really heavyweight cotton. It almost feels like canvas material. And we had 40,000 bags placed at 11 gins within the Mid-South and the Southwest regions in 2020. And we're continuing to trace those bales through the system with help from PCCA, Staple Cotton, and Allenberg. So far, we've had pretty good reports from gins and warehouses, as well as mills domestically that have received these bags. They've been fairly surprising how well these hold up. We can relate their quality to about the standard of a woven polypropylene bag in terms of how well they hold up in the warehouses and throughout the process. We have had a few issues with PBI tags and the adhesive not sticking on quite as well, but overall these bags seem pretty promising. I've got a quick video, a couple of videos for you all. This is at the gin, and this gin previously used woven polypropylene bagging, and they actually preferred the cotton bag just because it was easier to get onto that manual chute than the woven polypropylene bag. It's just a little bit easier to handle. So that was a promising note. And then these are being loaded into a container to go to the mill. And then this is arriving at the mill. You can see these bales still look really good. They had good luck with these and had a good report from that mill as well on the quality of these bags. And, you know, maybe moving forward, this might be something that the industry moves to. It really just depends on how this test run goes. We hope to have some more reports back from international mills by the end of the fall on these bales. And again, we're tracing them through the whole system. So we'll be in touch with more information as this progresses. And on a final note, we just want to make a point that it's critical that we reassure our customers and we maintain our reputation. And that really is the most important part in why we need to get rid of this plastic contamination and why we spend so much time and effort on this issue. Again, I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to speak with you today. And if anyone wants the slides or has any further information, I've listed my contact information below too.
Thank you, Lauren. We do have a question for you in the question and answer link there. And they're asking about the new plastic standards. Will they match the current patented plastics?
Give me just, am I still screen sharing?
You are.
Oh, there it goes. Okay. Sorry. There we go. Can you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
Will the new plastic standards match the current patented plastic?
The new plastic standards. Oh, for the module wrap?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. John may want to take this one or later in his presentation, but as far as I know, we are modeling the module wrap standards after the premium yellow and pink module wraps. But we are adding color into that as well. And so hopefully leaning towards that blue for easier detection. But yes, in terms of quality and chemical makeup of it, it will be modeled after the premium wraps.
If anyone else has any questions for Lauren, if you could go ahead and type those in now. We'll make sure that we bring those to our attention, or any of our other presenters as we move forward with the program. We are recording this, so she was gracious enough to offer you the slides, but it's our intention to also provide you with the recording of this presentation as well, so you can refer back to it. So take advantage of either of those opportunities for these resources. With that, I'll go ahead and introduce our next presenter. Dr. John Robinson is our AgriLife Cotton Marketing Specialist. He is a professor with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, and currently his program emphasizes risk management issues related to cotton, including cash markets, hedging, contracting, insurance, policy, and transportation and logistics. And We appreciate him presenting the long-term cost implications of plastic contamination in our cotton. Robinson?
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Can you see my slide there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I've got some economic and marketing considerations really kind of molded together in the form of a motivational speech. So I'm going to begin here. Lauren mentioned, the important and somewhat obvious point that prevention is the most important deal here. And this is a picture just of kind of the value chain of going from lint to gin bales to making yarn to cloth to clothes, all the way around. Obviously, we're adding value as we move around here. And so the obvious point is, if we're gonna prevent a contamination problem, we want to do it earlier in this cycle when things are a whole lot cheaper here, as opposed to finding, which I understand this happens with plastic, finding contaminated, thread in cloth or in a garment or something like that, where you're throwing away something that's product that's 10 or 100 times more expensive, more valuable than it is back up at this stage. We want to nip the problem in the bud back up here. So just kind of a thought that I didn't really have to tell you. That's pretty obvious. We think about the cost to the growers. There's two ways to think about the cost impact of plastic contamination. Lauren mentioned this. If it shows up in the grading, then the grower bears the cost for those bales that are so graded, those individual affected bales. So if you think about what happens to those bales in the market, well, you talk to a cotton merchant, they basically can't do much with those bales, so they really don't want them. That's what they'll tell you. That's what they'll tell you verbally, and that's what they'll tell you with their price. If you had a forward contract to deliver bales to a merchant, and probably in that contract, there's some kind of a buyer discretion clause that they don't have to take it if it has plastic, and many of them just won't. Or if they do buy it, they might buy it for 15 cents a pound or something like that. So when that gets translated by AMS in the spot quotes, AMS just reports that as 40 cents off as the discount associated with having the discount to the market price associated with having plastic contamination. But it may be 100%. I mean, it may be the merchant just flat out won't take it. That's for actual, market, trading, buying that price. The loan value is also affected because, and this isn't a conspiracy theory, this is just how the loan discounts are calculated. They're a 2-year average of this up here. So for the last year, there's been a 40-cent hickey that's been averaged. That's why the discount for the loan value went from this to this. It's because in 19, they averaged in one of those. Well, what are they going to do next year? They're going to average in another one of those 40-cent hickeys. So the loan discount for plastic contamination is going to keep going up. And frankly, if AXA had their way, plastic contaminated bales wouldn't even be loan eligible. So this, while it may have been an option for growers looking to find a home for plastic contaminated bales that a merchant wouldn't want to buy from them, the loan is going to increasingly not be an option, at least not an economic option. So it's a serious problem. Again, it's a serious problem that affects the bales, just those individual bales that are so classed. But as Lauren also already pointed out, the real problem is for those bales that aren't detected, the plastic isn't detected in classing, and the effect that has a more widespread, broader reaching effect on everybody. So initially, if a merchant sells a bale to a mill and they open it up and they find plastic contamination in it, well, the merchant and the mill are going to kind of bear those initial costs. It's going to slow down the mill operations. They're going to have to hire people or maybe expensive machinery to try to detect the remaining contamination. But they'll push back on the merchant. They may reject a whole load that had some of that plastic in it, or at least push back on those bales that they find were contaminated. So people downstream are bearing the costs. What I'm most worried about from a reputational standpoint is if it becomes a persistent problem, if the expectations of the mills are that a certain country or a certain region of a country is a source of this problem, then it becomes sort of what I'm calling a generalized risk. That is, it's a risk to the reputation of all the bales from a particular region. So, just think about it. What would a mill do if a certain region of the United States developed, a reputation over a number of years of being a source of plastic contamination? Well, given a choice, they wouldn't buy bales from that region if they could help it. And if they did, then the implication from kind of common sense and economic theory and past experience is that they'll bid lower for bales from those regions. They'll reduce their bids by the amount of their expected mitigation costs. And like I say, we have some evidence for this. We have some precedents for this, not from plastic contamination. There's very little impact or data that we can get our hands on as of yet, but we have experience in other forms of contamination that would have us worry about this sort of thing. This is a picture. This picture is it's over 10 years. It's a dozen years old. This is from Indonesia. What it's a picture of is a room full of people that the mill had to hire to go through and find contamination. Now, it's not just plastic. It's other forms of contamination. But this is a picture from Indonesia, again, 10 or 12 years ago. This is a picture from India 10 or 12 years ago. But this is the first thing a mill is going to do if they open up a bale and realize that there's a whole bunch of contamination in it. And so they're going to have to go through all the bales from that particular purchase, from that particular source. And this costs about, it's been estimated 1 to 2 cents a pound. It just adds to the cost of that cotton. Now, that may not seem like a lot to you, 1 to 2 cents a pound, but again, think about the mill's response. If they don't have any other reason to think that it's risky to buy cotton from that region, so we're going to try not to do it. But if we have to do it, we're going to have to go through this exercise. Well, then they'll basically discount their bids for mills or cotton from those particular regions. And that's where the economics of this gets pretty ugly. So I've got some numbers. I think I showed you these last year, looking at a 2019. In 2019, 1% of the bales from the Corpus Christi classing office, this is how many bales were classed. 1% of them had plastic contamination. So, if 1% of them were docked 40 cents, were classed that way and took a 40-cent hickey, that's the total loss right there. And that's a big number, and that's that would bite the growers that own those bales, produce those bales. But compare that to all of the bales. I know this part is just purely hypothetical. All right, don't get me wrong. This is just a math example, but all the bales in that region, if they were docked 2 cents a pound because of a bad developed reputation, that adds up to a really big number. In this example, this would be for 2019. But this kind of an effect isn't just limited to the bales or the year that it happens. You could have another 2-cent hickey the following year in 2020. It would have added up to that. And maybe a third year, we might have more bales. Hopefully we will, coming from the Corpus Christi classing office. It might add up to another 20 million bale number here. Now, how did I come up with this example? Again, I just told you it was a hypothetical example. And why is it multi-year and why is it so big? We have examples from history with other types of contamination. The one that comes to mind most is the sticky cotton problem, because that was a well-studied problem back in the 80s and 90s. You know, every once in a while, certain regions of the country, particularly down along here in Texas, the high plains of Texas, South Texas, Arizona, would have whitefly, particularly bad whitefly problems. And there'd be a lot of sticky cotton. And that wasn't something that showed up in classing. So it was discovered at the mill level if a bale was sticky or not. And of course, you could imagine it really gums up a textile mill when the fibers are all sticking together. Well, I describe this as a well-studied problem. Economists got into the act and tried to look at what the longer-term implication of that sticky cotton problem was. The theoretical and just the practical thought was, you know, it's gonna, whatever the extra processing costs are gonna get bid into the price. Well, the there was some research that was conducted that guesstimated, again, kind of like those photographs I showed you, the estimated cost, extra processing, mitigation, slowing down, what have you, to the mills was on the order of 2 cents a pound. And then they did some economists did some research basically comparing the prices bid from Arizona for a certain HVI quality compared to San Joaquin Valley of the same quality. And there was in fact a 2 cent discount that lasted for at least a couple of years, which was attributed to the reputational effect of this problem. And similar research was done when we had a bad whitefly outburst in the high plains. So, you know, it can happen, and it could happen if we had this persistent plastic problem. If it developed into a regional reputational thing, then it becomes a collective problem. And that's not something we want to, to see. So I'm getting involved in some research that it's just coming together now to study some of these same questions to try to get a handle on what does the plastic contamination actually cost the mills in terms of mitigation and loss, and if we can see any regional cost differences already between different regions of the country. And frankly, I hope that part of the research is an absolute failure. That is to say, I hope we don't see any price effect, and I hope we never do, because we need to prevent the problem. We need to prevent the problem at this level. So that's the end of my sermon. I'd be happy to answer anybody's questions if they have them. My contact information is there. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. I appreciate those comments. And if anyone else does have any questions, please feel free to use our Q&A or text chat feature there, and we'll make sure that those get answered by any of our panelists. If not, we'll go ahead and move on to our next presenter. Mr. Ben Robles is the Area Director for the USDA Classing Office in Corpus Christi. The Cotton and Tobacco Program facilitates the marketing by providing standardization, grading, and marketing news services for our cotton-related products and tobacco, while also administering the Cotton Research and Promotion Program. Mr. Robles oversees the classing of all the bales ginned at over 50 gins in this region. And so we appreciate him being here to present some of the data and what he's seeing coming through the classing office here in Corpus Christi. Mr. Robles.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ben Robles. I am going to talk about, again, the plastic contamination that we saw here at the classing office in Corpus Christi. First of all, as you can see, the Corpus Christi serves all of the gins that we have in South Texas and the Blacklands area, from the valley all the way to close to the Dallas border. The first slide shows how we did this past season. This past crop year, as you can see, represented by the green bars, in 2019, we classed a little over 1.8 million bales. In 2019, 2.1 million bales plus. And last year we did a little more than 1.7 million bales. And that's basically the green bars, and the samples class numbers are on the left-hand side. I showed these two bars last year's, and the purple line is basically the number of samples with plastic that we found on those years, on those crop years. And the blue, light blue lines were the ratio of samples with plastic that we found. Again, a ratio is a relationship between the total number of samples class and the total number of samples with plastic contamination. So as we saw in 2018 that we classed about 1.8 million, and we found 1,400 samples with plastic on 19 crop, we did 2.1 million and almost 1,700 samples with plastic. The crop was greater, the number of samples was greater, but once we see it as a ratio, we can see that it was about the same thing on both crops. So this meaning that every time that we class an approximate number of close to 1,300 samples, we were encountering one sample with plastic and calling it as with plastic. This past year, 2020 crop, the number of samples that we classed was a little more than 1.7, actually 1.742 samples or bales that we classed. We encountered 943 samples with plastic. So the ratio based on those two numbers, the samples class, bales class, and the plastic, give us a ratio of about 1850. Meaning that we improved this past years than compared to the previous 2 years. So we were encountering one sample with plastic approximately every 1,800 samples that we were classing. It looks like we are showing a little bit of improvement. Now, from a different point of view, in this chart, we see the total number of samples classed with plastic contamination by classing office during the past 2 crop years. As we can see, only the Visalia office had a greater number of samples with plastic compared to the 2019 crop. You can see it right here. As a small note, I believe the Visalia had most of the plastic from black plastic, or that we were saying the plastic mulch that they have over there from prior vegetable crops. All other offices, including Corpus Christi, had a smaller number of samples with plastic. One can very easily say it is an overall improvement for every office. Unfortunately, once we see our next slide with the number of samples with plastic contamination from the ratio point of view, we will notice it is not that simple. This is the slide with the ratio. So when you compare the sample with plastic, we can see that although most of the classing office had a reduced number of samples with plastic, only the Corpus Christi, Texas, and the Dumas classing office improved the number compared to the 2019 crop. And this is based on the ratio, and you can see 1,864 on this past crop, 2020 crop, on Corpus Christi compared to the previous year. So our ratio was higher or better. Obviously, I remember mentioning last year about the Florence. Florence classing office was seeing last year one sample with plastic every time they classed close to 17,000 samples. An example that I gave them was that we were seeing one sample of plastic here at the Corpus Christi classing office just about once every hour while we were classing. And as a relationship, it seemed like the Florence classing office was seeing one sample of plastic every shift or every shift and a half, depending on how much the production of classing that it had at that time. Again, just a reminder, a ratio is the relationship between the total number of samples classed compared to the total number of samples with plastic contamination. So here we have a summary of the crop again by class and office. And this is the production that they have on samples class and on the green bars. And then the yellow ones are the total number of samples with plastic. And the blue line will tell us the ratio for each one of the class and offices. The Corpus Christi, 1864, Visalia, 1174, and Florence, 13866. One thing also to notice in this slide is that consistently the Corpus Christi classing office has the fourth place in classing totals compared to all of the other offices. Just slightly less than the Lubbock, Macon, and Memphis classing office. Now this is the slide that we were expecting. Last year, I showed only the green bars. And this bars were showing all the way up to the top because my chart ranged only until 12,000 samples in Virginia. And this slide displays the samples with plastic contamination in the Corpus Christi classing office represented by gin. As we can see, the variation in the number of samples with plastic contamination is significant for most gins, one way or the other. Last year, this chart ranged from 0 to 12,000. Now, because of one gin with 22,000 Bale's class and only one sample with plastic, the range went up to 20,000. That's what I was telling you about this. Notice last year, gins with the most plastic or smaller ratio. Last year, those green bars were last year the gins. If we can see, most of them had an improvement on this past year. Besides, but at the same time, we had gins like gin number 10 that got a little worse or a little bad in 16, 29, 30, and gin number 40. This gin 33 last year had about the same amount, but it had a couple of samples. This gin had a couple of samples of plastic last year, and that's why the ratio was over about 12,000. But this gin had only one sample of plastic with a production a little over 22,000 samples that we class. On number 15, that's the average for our classing office. As we can see too, we had a slightly improvement from 1 in 1,300 to 1 in 1,800. We still have a long way to go. Now we're going to see a summary of the colors of that plastic that we saw this past year. We added a couple of colors, the blue, light blue for the multiple colors, the gray colors, and the orange color. But most of them, they were here last year too. And the percents are just about the same. But then how can we relate to the US? This is the US amount, percent. And now I'm going to compare the US to the Corpus Christi classing office. You see the big difference between the US percent and us for the multiple orange and black colors. Again, let's go to the black. We have only 2.8 and the US has 13.9. I want to believe, even though I have not seen the individual values for the Visalia, that great part of the Visalia lies in this black color. The multiple is a combination of colors. It could be different colors of wrapping, but we have a greater number, and I want to believe that maybe also it has to be with those plastic bags that we find in the field, and then a lot of them in our area will be white and red, and will end up in the multiple range. The gray is about the same, and the orange, we had a greater wrapping of orange color here in our area. With that, I conclude my presentation, and I'm open for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Robles. If we do have any questions for Mr. Robles, please get those into our chat. And it looks like we do have a couple that have come in. One is asking if you have any thoughts on where the orange color is coming from.
The orange color, as far as I know, and that's not my area, but I think it's also that wrapper that Lauren was mentioning from a different company. I heard rumors that it's a Chinese brand. I really do not know exactly for a fact, but it is a Bale wrapper more than anything.
Okay. And it looks like we also have a question about, are you attempting to determine the source or polymer of any of the materials pulled from the cotton?
We don't have the technology here in the Classen office to find out that, answer that question.
And then there's a question about the areas with the highest ratios. Is it possible that these areas have more conventional modules and less round modules?
I keep hearing that South Texas or our area has a lot more round modules than conventional modules. I hear that a lot of harvesting equipment comes to South Texas to start their work with us and before getting back to their own areas. But that's just comments. But in any way, even if that's so, it should be, if I'm going to say 80% of our modules are round in another Classen office, and just for the example, we're going to say Florence has 40% only, then that relationship should maintain in the number of samples of plastic. So it shouldn't be a difference no more than 50% or 60% from one to the other. And based on the examples, we're seeing almost 10 times more than like 800% or 1,000% difference. So there is a difference, but that's not the whole answer of the plastic contamination.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Robles. I appreciate you sharing that information with us. And I think the growers in this region should be pretty pleased to see that there was some improvement over the last year, but certainly with the goal of not having any, we do have a long way to go still, but can see that if we made some effort to improve, that has certainly paid off from last year's growing season over the one in 2019. So good to see that.
Well, good morning to all, and it's 10 o'clock is on my computer screen, so we will continue on with our next session. We have three individuals that have so-called been in the trenches on this issue, and we're really glad that we have them with us this morning, and they have agreed to come and visit with us this morning. So please, if they spur a thought or whatever within their presentation, please make note, and we'll have a chance for discussion and such as at the end of this session. So jot down your question, and hopefully we will have the ability to ask these guys some good questions that they may be able to answer for us. So without further ado, we're going to start our session off. Our three panelists are Dr. Robert Hardin. He is an assistant professor in the Department of Biological and Agricultural Engineering and Texas A&M AgriLife Research. And then we'll go to John Winura, who is an agricultural engineer, cotton production and processing research for USDA. And then we have Ross Rutherford, Vice President, Product Management and Marketing with the Loomis Corporation. So again, we're very happy to have these individuals with us this morning with a lot of depth and knowledge on this issue. So like I said, we'll begin this with Dr. Robert Hardin. So if he is ready, we will turn it over to him.
All right. Can everyone see my screen and hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
All right. Well, good morning. As Bobby said, I go by Bobby too, but I've been working on this a while. Before I was at Texas A&M, I was at the Stoneville Gen Lab. So we've been working on.
Dr. Hardin?
Yes.
You're still in, you go to presentation mode?
Yeah, let me work on that. Did that do it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Good to go.
I had to switch my screen. So so I've been working on this a while, since not long after some of the first round module harvesters were introduced. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the research we've been doing at A&M in the last few years. And we've got several projects. I think our previous speakers have really covered the importance of this, so I'm just going to jump right into what we've been working on. So I've had several students working on a module tracking project. We've also been looking at how we can detect plastic in the field with an unmanned aerial system, or UAV. Lauren had some great pictures there of showing some of the trash we might find in a field. In that case, it was some of the discarded module wrap. Of course, we can also get along roadsides a lot of plastic bags and things like that. One other area we've targeted for looking at getting the plastic out is at the module feeder. And then we've done some more work just seeing how Gen Equipment is at removing plastic. So with that, I'm going to start talking about this, what we call the Smart Cotton Module Tracking and Monitoring System. And so this system was really set up to demonstrate some potential uses of the RFID technology. And this was some work funded by Cotton Incorporated. And we were really wanting to demonstrate a potential application for that technology and to show how we could improve module handling logistics. But pretty quickly, it became apparent, we can collect a lot of images on these modules and attach that ID number to that image. So we can track any damage to the wrap. And we know that gens report that damaged wrap is more likely to result in contamination, but we still don't know some basic things. How commonly is that wrap damaged in handling before it gets to the gen? What exactly causes it? I mean, of course, we all know some ways that we can put holes in our module wrap, but what's the frequency of these different sources? And then if we have damage, how often does that result in a contaminated bale? There may be some things that aren't consequential, whereas other kinds of damage may end up where we get a lot of extraneous matter calls for plastic. So this is kind of the basic system. We put this on some loaders that were used with a spear to move round modules. So here we simply have some cameras mounted both high and on the side. There's one underneath that's a little harder to see there that really captures the bottom, which is where we do see a lot of the damage to the plastic wrap. And then we have our RFID antennas, which simply read that tag number on each module. So we have a unique identifier for that module. And of course, we're collecting all this data and saving it for analyzing it later. So this is just kind of shows you what we can tell. We can really tell where that loader's traveling. And this is on a gin yard. We also have some data where it was moving modules in the field. But most of our data right now is from gin yards. So we can see where we see a lot of action where it's unloading trucks or where it's moving modules into lines on the gin yard. And part of, like I said, what we wanted to do is really some logistics work. Can we save the gins some cost by operating this more efficiently? But we quickly found some incidences of module wrap damage. And for this study at this gin, we found just under 5% of the modules had some sort of damage. Some common things we see are some of these tears in the bottom of the module. And even though this one here, this image D, is rather small, we could still see it on our image. Now this we don't have on the top images, A and B. We don't have that ID number. We're unloading one from the trailer, and that's the ID that we'll detect. But we can see a module behind it that's clearly the wrap has failed. So we noticed some other things in collecting these images as well. Now this work, along with some studies that Dr. Wanyura has done at the Lubbock Gin Lab and another collaborator of ours, Jason Ward at NC State, this has really all been summarized in a report published by Cotton Incorporated. And I'll share my slides, and this report's linked in there. The Cotton Incorporated has put up on their Cotton Cultivated website. And it's just really some ways to prevent plastic contamination when handling these round modules. I'm going to cover some of the events we saw in the field in the gin yard. I know Dr. Wanyura is going to go more in depth at some of the work he's been doing at the module feed. So what we see here in this module are just some small holes on the bottom of the wrap. In almost all likelihood, this module was stored on some cotton stalks. It was staged on cotton stalks in the field, or just set down on some, and they've punctured the wrap. Again, the prevention here is we want to unload it at the end of the row and then stage them in a turn row or on the grassy borders of a field, not on the cotton stalks, because you will get punctures from those stalks. Another one, then this damage is a little more substantial here. And again, we're not exactly 100% certain of the cause, but a likely one from this. We saw evidence of this multiple times, and I know Dr. Ward saw at other sites. When that module is moved through the field and not lifted above the cotton stalks, it can tear the bottom of the wrap. So again, the prevention there is simple. We lift the module above stalks during transport. And again, this is something I know Lauren mentioned, having trained personnel to operate your equipment. You want people that are going to follow the proper procedures and then know how to operate that equipment properly. And we've heard anecdotally from gins, they have had contamination problems, when they may have used less skilled operators on some of their loaders to move modules. So we know it makes a difference. Now this one has some torn plastic on the side, and this was probably damage that occurred during staging. That location, either the forks on a tractor or the spear on a loader contacted the side and tore it. Or it could even be, these modules at this gin, I don't believe were handled with a module truck, but you can also tear the edge of a module, with a module truck if your bed's not tilted at the right angle or you turn while you're loading it. But we see this commonly with the spears, it's easy to catch the side of that round module. So again, this is proper training of the operator is how you avoid that. We've noticed here, this module is being unloaded from a flatbed trailer, and we see a small tear there. That's likely from the decking on the trailer. If there's some, a nail or some rough spot, you slide the module, you can catch the plastic wrap and tear it. Again, this is a operator issue, but also a maintenance issue. Make sure your trailers that you're using for hauling modules are in good shape, and any worn components, whether it's wood decking or some metal places where there might be something that could catch, try to minimize that. Again, this is our module that completely failed back there. And while this may not always be preventable, if we do see tears in wrap, we want to repair those immediately. Those tears can propagate, certainly as weather changes or you get some winds. If you have a tear, it can propagate, and when you have total wrap failure, then it becomes a real problem on the gin yard, or if it's in the field, even at that stage. So a few other potential issues before ginning, before that module gets to the gin. So one is removing other plastic sources from the field before harvesting. Some of this is the discarded module wrap where we grow cotton year after year. Those are some nice pictures of some that's starting to break down after it's been out there. I've seen that in a number of fields. We want to dispose of that properly. Really, probably the major issue outside of module wrap when it comes to contamination is plastic mulch. This is a sporadic problem, only occurs where there's some fruit or vegetable crop grown on mulch. But when it happens, it is a serious problem. There will be usually a large number of bales contaminated, not only for the grower that is growing cotton where there was plastic mulch, but that cotton gets into the gin and may affect other growers as well. So it's really not a good idea to rotate cotton with a fruit vegetable crop grown on plastic mulch. You're asking for trouble there. You certainly, you could make some extensive efforts to get up all that mulch, but that's going to be some expense. And I think the cost of potential contamination is too great to justify that. Harvester maintenance. This is kind of an issue as we start to put more hours on these machines. I know there were some issues that arose in Australia where there were some worn components that started tearing some of the wrap as it was applied to the module. We also see with the candy cane modules, as some people call them, where the wrap is actually wrapped inside the module. That's really a kind of a failure of the wrap clutch on the harvester. So we want to make sure it's operating properly to avoid some of that. And then the point about the module truck chains, make sure you have the right lugs on the chains and that you're operating it where that speed of the chain is matched to the ground speed. And we've mentioned removing any other plastic contaminants that may be present in the field. Of course, there's some expense and time to that. One thing that we're looking at doing is how can we find this perhaps in an easier method? So we've taken an unmanned aerial system or a drone, and we've been working on a study to identify plastic bags in the field. So for this, plastic bags were actually attached to the plants at different heights and just collected regular images. And we found pretty high accuracy at detecting the bags. And it's a little hard to see here, but you can clearly make out some of the plastic bags. This is cotton close to harvest, so we see where there's some open bowls there. And this shows the detected locations. And it's worked with both brown and white. And the plastic bags were attached to cotton plants, the top, middle, and bottom of the plant. Now, there's kind of the possibility a lot of trash that collects in the fields ends up really, at ground level. Some of it's even, partly obscured by soil. So this may be a little bit better than we could expect in the real world. But I think this deserves some further investigation. We'd like to find some tools to make that easier. One thing in the gin we've been working on is, where does the plastic contamination end up once it gets into the gin? So I did some work on this at Stoneville a number of years ago. One thing we didn't have there was an actual module feeder. So we think that's important in kind of the mechanism for how plastic is introduced. Some of the bigger pieces tend to wrap around the dispersing cylinders, which break apart the module. You might be able to make those out in this small scale one in our microgen. So that's a difference in this study. And so we measured just the amount of plastic that's removed by each machine and that ends up in the lint. We're still analyzing the data. We've sent the lint off to Cotton Incorporated, to their textile mill to find what they can there. But basically, we see that small pieces, and this is all with module wrap, and we see either this is single, double, or triple layered module wrap. As it's wrapped together, you may get where 1, 2, or 3 piece layers are stuck together. So we see that both the smaller pieces and then the larger pieces aren't as removed as well, except for the ones that have multiple layers stuck together, that are thicker, essentially. And this is really the same conclusion we came to in Stoneville, that, and that's generally a good thing for module wrap. It is a thicker plastic. So we see that there's a better chance that gets removed than things like plastic bags or the ag mulch. That's plastic bags tend to be about a 1/2 mil thickness, and ag mulch is commonly about 1 mil. And a single layer of the module wrap's 3 mils. So we see much better removal with that. But we're still not getting all of it. And any plastic left in is a problem. So there was also a study done, and some of this work was done by Dr. Alex Thomason before he left for Mississippi State, or it was started by him, and we're finishing this up. And there's a study also done, it was kind of supported by the Cotton Foundation and work with Deere and Tama, looking at plastic in bales from a contamination test at a commercial gin. So that's still being analyzed as well. So as I mentioned, kind of the mechanism for introducing this into a gin, we see that some of the long pieces, particularly if the module is cut at the wrong location, the module wrap, those long pieces wrap around the dispersing cylinders on that module feeder. And then smaller pieces break off and enter the cotton. And most gins will typically shut down periodically and manually remove this. That's time consuming, so they only can do it, maybe, every shift or so. And it's also potentially a safety issue. While gins typically, follow proper procedures, they're going to shut down and lock out equipment. You'd still rather not have people in that location. And you'd rather not have to shut down your production to remove this. So we've been looking at an automated system to remove it. We're installing this on our module feeder that we have in our microgen. And it's not shown here, it's kind of removed for visibility there, but it has a stainless steel brush cylinder, and it moves up and down a set of rails with lead screws. So we've integrated this with the USDA ARS plastic detection algorithm that Dr. Pelletier at the Lubbock Gin Lab developed. And so when we detect plastic, we can automatically run it. It'll move this brush to the right cylinder, turn and remove it, and then it lifts up out of the module feeder when it's done operating. The idea too is that we can do this before the gin runs out of cotton. Under the module feeder, we typically have a steady flow feed control, which accumulates cotton. So we might have, 30 seconds to a minute's worth of cotton to feed into the gin, even while we're not feeding a module in. So of course, that's good for the gin's bottom line to maintain production. If we can do this while they can, only have to stop feeding cotton into the gin for a short time. So kind of our ongoing and future work. So we're continuing to look at the module tracking studies. We've gotten some data, but we really want to get a lot more to get a better idea of, what our damage cover frequency is, kind of in a number of situations. And more data from in the field. We really focused our early test on the gin yard, but, obviously we're moving and handling those modules in the field, and we want to look at some of the staging and see what we see there. We need to test our plastic removal system. We've largely got that assembled and ready to go. We'll be testing that soon. One thing we're looking at doing this season and probably the next is evaluating some of the rat removal systems in gins. And of course, I think most people in the ginning industry are familiar with some of the shortcomings of some of these systems, but we really want to look at this from an engineering perspective and identify some potential improvements that we can make to avoid contamination. Kind of some longer term things. One of well, he's a technician working on this, but he's going to start graduate school, and he's actually has a material science background. So we may be looking at some ways to develop some new separations methods for cotton and plastic. And really, I saw the question earlier about, looking at the bale bagging and, getting away from the plastic to the cotton bale bags. And of course, that question comes up with the modules too. Can we get away from the plastic? Well, I think the system we have is certainly in the intermediate term is going to be around. Just the time to get something else to market and something that delivers those benefits for the producers. But there's been some work on robotic harvesting and some other kind of future harvest systems that we'll continue to pursue, where we might be able to get away from that plastic wrap. So I'd like to thank everybody for their time. My email's there if you have questions. I see a few popped up in the chat, but I'll let our moderator decide how we want to proceed here with any questions now. Or
well, this is a question. Do we have any data as to the degradation of cotton wrap over time in the field? I might as well go ahead and.
Yeah, I'll answer that as best I know, and Dr. Wanyura may really know better than I do. I know clearly it's made to hold up over a period of time, and a lot of that would be in their testing and development of the wrap that Tama and Deere did. It certainly has some UV stabilizers and things like that. Now you can see that what was left out in the field over a season there, that those pictures that Lauren had, it will degrade eventually. I don't know the exact lifetime on that. If you leave modules out for multiple years, what would happen? But maybe perhaps John knows the answer to that, so I'll stop there. But certainly over the course of a ginning season, we don't really see issues there.
I don't see any other questions at this moment. Hopefully somebody will have some a little later in the discussion. But Dr. Hardin, we greatly appreciate you being with us this morning. And again, great information to bring to all that are with us. Anyway, again, thank you, and we'll proceed on. I think up next we've got John Wanyura, agricultural engineer with the USDA, and I introduced him a little bit while ago. But again, I know he's been very in the trenches, like I said, and we'll turn it over to him and see what he has to bring us.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Bobby, for the introduction. My colleague, Dr. Hardin, mentioned about the work being done or highlighted the work being done there at specifically at Texas A&M. This presentation, we're going to discuss more of the research that's being done across the U.S. Cotton Belt at the various ARS ginning laboratories. All three ginning laboratories are collaborating not only together, but with several other university partners and organizations, Cotton Incorporated, Lummus and Bratney, corporate partners, to transfer this technology into the ginning and cotton industry in general, to help address some of these issues that we've got with plastic contamination. So I wanted to start out by listing a few of the projects that are ongoing. Bobby mentioned some of the work going on with infield module tracking and tracking some of the damage going on there. That work is at Texas A&M, of course. The four that we're going to really highlight this morning are the work that we're doing on the module feeder systems, the gin apron, the feeder apron detection and ejection system. Don't worry, Ross, I'm not going to spill all the beans on that. I know that's probably the highlight of your presentation, but talk about some of the development of that system. In addition to some work being done at the Las Cruces and Stoneville Ginning labs related to a contamination removal machine, and then a system that they've developed for thermal removal of plastics that's really in the prototype stage, but really is showing some promise. There's other work looking at different detection technologies such as near infrared to be used for tracking plastic in the ginning process. That's ongoing. We won't talk much about that, but just I mention it just so that you're aware that work is going on. And then finally, we'll finish up with some discussion of the ASABE standard related to module wrap performance that Lauren mentioned earlier in her presentation. We'll flesh out a few more details on that. So starting out, this system for module feeder inspection was developed a couple of years ago. If you want to think of it in three different layers, there's kind of a simplified and a kind of a middle complexity layer, and then a final integrated system that we've done some testing with. And so this slide shows the basic system that was put together and tested commercially several years ago. This system has been tested over the last several years at commercial gins out here on the high plains of Texas. And this system consists of basically IP network cameras that look at the backside of the module feeder dispersing cylinders to identify when plastic is accumulates on those cylinders. We've made some updates to the way that those cameras are mounted and made it a little more generally applicable to different module feeder designs so that you're not having to build a specific mount for those cameras for each module feeder design. But this system is very effective at providing the information needed by the ginners to see when there is plastic that builds up on those cylinders. And this is nothing more than just a few cameras mounted in the back of the module feeder dispersing cabinet using basic either software provided by the original equipment manufacturer or using a free viewer off the internet to interface with those cameras and see the live video stream. Now, this simplified system, or the basic system that we've got displayed here, relies on natural pauses in the ginning system to really show when that plastic is accumulated on those cylinders. You have to have the flow of cotton into those dispersing cylinders stop so that the area between the cylinders and the cameras can clear out to give you a clear view of anything that may be on those on those cylinders. The next layer of complexity that was tested last year and the year before was an improved software system that works with this module feeder inspection system that interfaces with the PLC that controls the module feeder to effectively pause the bed of the module feeder on a preset time interval. There's different ways of doing this, but basically the system would work to where it has a program pause, say every 15 minutes, and it would pause the system for about 10 seconds, give or take, to allow that cotton to fall away and expose the clear view of the backside of those cylinders so that the gin crew, the ginner, can see the cylinders and know if there's plastic that has accumulated. The other feature of this software that was written into the code was the ability for machine vision algorithm to auto detect when plastic was built in or was accumulated on those cylinders. We're doing some more work to flesh that out and develop that a little bit more, but that is included there as part of that system. This system that I've just discussed with the camera mounts and using the OEM or the simplified software to look at the backside of those cylinders is available. This is the link that Lauren mentioned earlier on the National Cotton Ginners website. This is a white paper that discusses the design and installation of those systems. This is freely available to anybody. If your gin wants to try to put these in, this shows exactly how we did it, where we got the stuff, and how we put it together and made it work. So this link will be available with the slides. We'll provide those to Bobby And so everybody will be able to get that. The final system that we worked with over the last couple of years, this was as part of a project with that we did with John Deere and Tama, looking at module unwrapping and handling systems, or unwrapping and handling techniques that tend to leave plastic in the modules as they're fed into the ginning system. So we installed not only the module feeder inspection system on the backside of the dispersing cabinet, but we installed some additional cameras on the front end, or the unloading end of the module feeder, along with some RFID antennas, so that we could track the unloading process, or record the unloading and unwrapping process for these modules, and see what may have caused that plastic to remain in that cotton as it was fed into the gin. And so the way that this system works is, as I mentioned, we would see this progression of images kind of shows the way it works in reality. Basically, you have some event that happens during the unloading process. Either the module is not placed on the feeder properly, or something goes awry in the cutting or unwrapping process, to where we get a piece of plastic that remains with the cotton that eventually winds up on the dispersing cylinders that's captured by that module feeder inspection system that we discussed. So this helped to highlight some of those techniques that the gins need to pay attention to. Certainly, it showed some ways that you can improve handling, especially of small diameter modules. Those smaller diameter modules, if you're flipping them off the truck, for example, they often lack the correct geometry to stay upright on that flat end, and so they tend to either fall forward or backwards, often trapping plastic underneath the cotton as it's fed on into the gin. And even though those are small diameter modules, they're still much too large for humans to get on the feeder bed and pick them up or move them around very effectively to get all that plastic out. And so it's changed the way that some of those gins are handling those modules. They've gone to more of a wagon wheel orientation of handling the small diameter modules, so that if the case does happen where plastic is trapped, they can roll that module forward or backwards as needed more easily to remove that plastic. Moving on to the next section that we're going to discuss. This is the development of the color image camera, digital color camera based system to detect plastic on the feeder apron right before the cotton is fed into the gin stand. This technology was developed based on low-cost camera technology that's used in the cell phone industry. We use is developed with single board computers for a low-cost deployment situation, with a custom designed housing that holds the camera. And also there's compressed air that's fed into this camera housing that not only cools the electronics, but also blows that air over the lens protector here to keep that lens clean, so that it can have a clear view of the plastic or the material flowing down the feeder apron. Whenever plastic is detected, it sends a signal to a set of pneumatic valves that actuate an air knife down at the bottom, or at the base of the feeder apron, that blow that plastic out of the stream. And so you can see our technician here doing some quality control checking of the system to make sure that the cameras are on and detecting the changing color in the cotton flow, and then actually firing those solenoids to blow the perceived contaminant out of the system. Now, this technology has some challenges. As I mentioned, it is based on color digital imagers, and so those tend to mimic the human eye, the way that the human eye works, and our ability to perceive differences in colors. And so what we're trying to do is look for that color difference between the plastic and what we would consider normal cotton colors. And the challenge that we've got there is that most of the available colors that are used on the module wrap materials overlap the common cotton color space. And so that's been a challenge in designing the system to be tuned to look for the plastic, but not have false positives if you get cotton or colors in the cotton, such as from burrs or sticks that may overlap more with say the red, or excuse me, the pink module wrap colors that we see. Another issue that we have tend to have out here on the high plains can be yellow staining or yellow tinging in the cotton from environmental effects during storage or even during pre-harvest, where if we have yellowing of that cotton, then it tends to overlap very well with the yellow module wrap color. And so we can see an increase in the number of false positives that we get with the system that way. This system was commercialized under the name Viper, and Ross Rutherford, I believe, is going to discuss a lot more about that in his presentation. But this is these are images from the 2 installations that we've had of this technology so far. Here's some images of the materials that system was ejecting last year. You can see there's some cotton stalks. It was able to pick up on the green in the cotton stalks. Some mylar balloons with the ink printing on there helps to differentiate that material from the cotton. And then this is just a slew of other materials that was rejected by that system last year in Georgia. We took this technology last year to a different level. There were still some questions raised as to, well, do I really have that big of a problem? I'm not seeing a huge number of calls coming out of the AMS classing offices, and so I really don't think I have that big a problem. And so we wanted to try to help address that issue by providing some low-cost solutions to help answer that question. How, what is the magnitude of the problem that I have? Is it really nothing, I don't have a problem, or do I have something I need to address? And so we took a couple of these single node camera systems without the ejection technology and installed them over some gin stands in a couple of gins out here in the high plains of Texas, and helped to show some of the plastic occurrences. Now, it's not all module wrap. They're still processing a good number of conventional modules, and so we see all kinds of trash and contaminants coming down the feeder apron. But these systems were very effective in capturing that and giving a good insight to the ginners and the gin managers as to what level of problem they may have. Now, moving on to the contamination cleaner. This is the Golden Line contamination cleaner. It's built by a company in China, and Cotton Incorporated funded a project where they were able to purchase one of these machines and bring it over to the Las Cruces ginning laboratory and install it at that lab. This system, as advertised, is able to remove a lot of material from seed cotton. One of the things that they claim they can remove is special soft trash. I'm not exactly sure what that is, and I don't know that that's been completely defined yet, but this residue film is, they claimed, a greater than 80% efficiency at removing that. And so that was one of the attractive things to this off-the-shelf solution that attracted us to this off-the-shelf solution, to really see, is it that good? And so I think through the testing that they've done so far, that number is really closer to 60% when you're looking at module wrap type plastics. So the way this system works is there's a series of spiked rollers, opening beater type cylinders that open the cotton up, sends it through basically a horizontal type cleaner to open the cotton up more, and then provide that loose open material, both cotton and plastic, into an air plenum chamber where the plastic and the cotton is blown up towards this covered condenser drum, where the idea is that the plastic would stick to the screen drum and be carried on around to a doffing brush and thrown out as trash, and the cotton would be heavy enough with the seed still intact to fall down and be taken out as clean cotton. So they ran into some issues after installation, looking at the performance of this machine. The fan speed that the manufacturer specified was not high enough to really get anything to stick to that covered condenser drum or covered drum. This this image or this video that's playing now is the system operating at the specified fan speed that came from the manufacturer. And you can see that there's not just a whole lot of anything really sticking to that drum as it was intended to. Now, they made a change to the fan speed and basically doubled it and got a lot more, excuse me, let me pause this one, got a lot more material to stick to that drum. And you can see that there's plastic pieces and cotton sticking to it. And the system is working a lot more effectively with a higher fan speed. And so that was one of the improvements that they were able to point out and make there at the Las Cruces lab. They did some testing looking at specific colors and types of plastic that was spiked into the seed cotton and looked at the performance of that machine for those different types. And the lighter weight round module wrap and shopping bags were captured within the range of the manufacturer's claim. So that was one of the things that was a positive point there. The thicker, stiffer wrap was not as effectively removed. There may be a density effect happening there, but you can see in these two pictures here the effect of the fan speed. So this is the number of plastic pieces that were captured with half the fan speed. And then once they did increase the fan speed, they were able to collect or capture a significant number more that was initially put into the cotton. Some of the other issues that they're facing now trying to address is this issue of the plastic stripping off of that drum because of the airflow coming around that drum. You see early on there was a yellow piece right there that stripped off, and then there was just a blue piece that was stripped off. And so they're looking at design changes to help address that problem. Another very unique thing that they're looking at the Las Cruces lab is this concept of using a thermal removal system in a passive manner to remove plastic from seed cotton. So they did some testing and found that plastic will melt and stick to a metal plate at about 100 degrees Celsius or around 200 degrees Fahrenheit. And at those temperatures, cotton is not harmed. That's well below the critical temperature for cotton where it will combust. And so that's a fairly safe thing. So from that, they were able to design this concept where cotton that contains plastic could be fed over a set of heated rollers, heated metal rollers that would have the plastic stick to the rollers, and then the rollers would rotate around while the cotton continues to fall and flow on through. The plastic would rotate around on the rollers back to a fixed stationary knife and be scraped off and removed later on. So there's some additional testing that they're working on there with this system, but it's showing some promise. And so that's a new unique passive system that doesn't rely necessarily on high-tech detection and removal systems, just using first principles to remove that material from the flow of cotton. Now, going on to the module wrap performance standard, Lauren mentioned some of the background with this standard, and so I apologize if I rehash some of those, but just to cover it, so TAMA is currently the only sanctioned producer of wrap. They have the two product offerings, the premium wrap, which is the yellow and the pink wrap that you see, in addition to the blue value wrap. And all of those materials are offered in a standard and an Arctic configuration for the different use environments. The way that wrap works on the module is shown here in this diagram. This is for the premium wrap, where you have two different materials. You have an opaque interlayer material that has no tacky adhesive on it. So you have about a wrap and a half, or give or take, of that material, almost two wraps of that non-tacky interlayer material on the cotton itself. And then outside that, you have a couple layers of tacky layer material that's a translucent color that has that tacky adhesive that helps that material kind of bond to itself and hold the shape of the module and keep that wrap material stuck down to the outside of the module. in addition to the wrap tail adhesive, which really is a stronger adhesive that holds the tail down to the most outer layer of the plastic. A couple of other things to note on this diagram is this TAMA cut indicator that's been put on there since about 2018. This indicator is actually installed at the transition point between the two different layers of plastic, excuse me, two different plastic materials in that wrap portion. So this is that about 3-inch long cut zone indicator that tells you, okay, you need to go, you find this cut indicator and then you go back around this direction about 1 meter or 3 feet to place your cut. Okay. There's some other things that are in this wrap material, such as the RFID tags that can be used to help position that module for proper cutting. Most of the automated cutting systems will look for this RFID tag position number 8 and then go 180 degrees from that tag position to apply that automated cut. And so the last thing to point out here is that if you don't use a automated cutting system and you're just using a manual cutting system where you have a person out there looking at this wrap, they can't necessarily tell where tag number 8 is. So if they find that outermost human readable tag, go 180 degrees or to the opposite side of the module from there, and that's in the recommended cut zone location for properly cutting that wrap to help maximize the length of that inner tail, so that it unadhered inner tail, so that it can be more effectively seen and gotten rid of. So TAMA has these 2 patents that cover the technology and the manufacturing of that wrap. And those are set to expire here in the next few years. And so the reason for this standard is really to help protect the industry from new wrap manufacturers that may be coming onto the market with substandard wrap. That would be wrap materials that either inherently cannot withstand the stresses of what goes on the harvester or in the field during the storage period. So we have some of the some wrap materials that already exhibit that poor performance. We mentioned earlier this SMA wrap, this orange wrap that's come from a Chinese supplier, and they are subject to a patent infringement case by TAMA right now. And so there's some action going on trying to get that dealt with. But independent of that, in the future, there will be additional wrap manufacturers come into the game that they need to be providing good quality wrap to the industry to help address this issue of contamination and to hopefully minimize it. So our objective there is to basically develop a standard that specifies the minimum material strength and performance levels for that new wrap coming onto the market. There is an existing ASAB standard for cotton module cover material performance, and we're using that as our basis to develop this standard. We're modifying that standard to include the language and the specifications for this new round module wrap. That's a lot simpler method than going through a new standard development. So we're modifying that standard, and we hope to have something finished and available by the beginning of this ginning season. So to talk about the way that the standard in the concept for the standard moving forward. So there's a couple different testing aspects that are going into this. In the current working document that we have moving forward has already got of course, the standard scope and use statements that are kind of boilerplate information in the standard. That's all in there. There's a laboratory testing requirement that's being specified in the standard for these five tests, and these are based on ASTM testing methods so that they can be done under very tightly controlled laboratory conditions. We've got specifications in there showing manufacturers how to take samples of the new unused wrap material for these specific tests so that they can submit that material for compliance testing. We've done several rounds of testing, and we're actually in the 4th round of testing to gather the data that will be used in this standard right now. And so once that information is available and back, we'll summarize that. and hopefully get that draft standard moved on through the balloting process soon. There's also a field testing requirement that is really put in place to address the performance of the wrap system, if you will. So we can test the base material and look for any glaring errors, any glaring problems that may exist in the parent material that's used in that plastic. And that will help us to identify some fairly simple, straightforward things that may be indicators of poor performance. But really what we want to get to with this standard is to have some assurance that the material that's coming onto the market is going to perform in the field. If it doesn't work on the harvester, if it doesn't feed right into the module forming chamber, if it doesn't stay on the module and protect the cotton and keep that cylindrical form over an extended period of time in the storage environment, then it won't meet certification with this standard. And so we're putting in testing procedures, specification levels for the storage duration that it has to be evaluated under, what use environment it's going to be evaluated in, whether it's to be used in a hot or moderate environment or more of a moderate and cold environment. How does it perform under UV exposure? Does that adhesive break down, or does it remain intact? And then you've got, of course, just the natural repeated exposure to rain, wind, snow, all the other environmental effects. These images on the bottom of this slide help to show some of what we're trying to get at there. And it's shown here for the orange wrap. This could be other colors as well. But to demonstrate what we're trying to get to here is you see this tail is starting to pull up. This outer tail is starting to pull up off of the, the strong tail adhesive material on this particular module. And this was something that we saw pretty commonly with this orange wrap out here, that adhesive started to fail either in the field or very soon after it got to the gin yard. That would then progress to this situation where you have the module beginning to unwrap. That led to this type of situation where the module would completely unwrap and then finally explode on the gin yard, creating a huge mess and problem for the gin. Now, going back to the module feeder work, it was most often the case that we saw contamination events occur when we had a broken module show up on the module feeder. If that module does not stay whole all the way from the harvester to the module feeder floor, there's a very high chance that you will have contamination make it into the gin from that module. So that is one situation that we're definitely trying to avoid and trying to prevent with use of this standard. The other thing that we're trying to include in this standard is a specification of color. We have an approach going forward right now that would have 2 levels of specification for potential wrap materials coming onto the market. The first is an acceptable level that would say, just don't use, obviously noxious colors such as clear plastic, white plastic, brown plastics, those type of things that are very difficult for color camera-based, digital color camera-based systems to detect. Okay, and so if you do that and you meet the performance requirements from the laboratory and the field, you're at the acceptable level for the standard. Now, moving forward, there's a higher level of certification in the standard that would have a more specific color specification. And one of the concepts moving forward is to use this, it's a CIE LCH color model concept. That's a fancy term for the color space is defined as a color sphere. You specify these 3 parameters for the lightness, the color, the chroma or saturation, and the hue of the color. And then also put in this delta E, which is basically an allowable margin around that single point that you specify on that color sphere. Now, Lauren mentioned there was some color difference that occurred in the Bale wrap material that they saw this last year with this Pantone 306C color. And that gets to this concept of using a delta E value, which basically allows manufacturers to be off of that mark by a certain amount. Okay, and so by specifying that delta E value, you can tighten up how close you really want those manufacturers to be to that specification. So this is one concept moving forward. This has not been finalized. We don't know that that's the final color. I mean, that would be maybe a natural choice for it, but I don't know, in the end, what that color specification would be just yet at this point. But that's one of the concepts moving forward. So there's a good bit of support for this. The National Cotton Council voted during this last annual meeting as the entire body to support the recommendation of development of this standard. All of the ginning associations have expressed their support for the development of this standard. And so we hope to get this wrapped up and move forward for this ginning season. So with that, I will turn it back to Bobby and on to Ross maybe.
Thank you, Mr. John. Lots of great information there. And again, we appreciate you being with us this morning. We had a question, why not introduce the standard now?
So the standard now, we just don't have the confidence in the data just yet. I mean, we're working towards that, and we're hoping that will get put in, as I mentioned, by this ginning season. Now, I think I understand the impetus of your question there in wanting to get this out, getting something going now, and we do appreciate that, and that's what we're working towards. This standard will not be certainly the final rattle out of the bag. There's some more research that's being done to help provide more information that will improve this standard as we move forward. The goal here is to get something on the books that can then be more easily revised in the future once we have some better information to put in there. But we want to make sure that what we move forward with now is rock solid, that we're not creating more of a problem for ourselves than we really intend to.
All right. Well, again, thank you for the information, and glad you were with us this morning.
Thank you.
So moving forward, we're going now to Ross Rutherford. As I said earlier today, he's the Vice President of Product Management and Marketing with the Loomis Corporation. And as been alluded to, he's got some extra information on some of the things that has already been talked about. But again, thank you, Ross, for being with us this morning.
All right. Well, I thank y'all for the opportunity to talk to you today. And John and Bobby Hardin have done a great job in giving some of the background. This is something we have been dealing with ever since we didn't realize how bad it was, but when the onset of the onboard module harvesters, this brought it to the forefront. First, let me say, contamination is not new to the cotton industry, and the National Cotton Council has been educating the industry about the problems of contamination for a long time. And why that's important is because cotton, unlike synthetic fibers, man-made fibers, cotton, you do deal with contamination. And as a result, you've got, you're battling a competitive fiber in the marketplace that is basically contamination free. It's extruded, it's cut to the prescribed length, it's treated. And so it's got much higher uniformity, and it's got little or no contamination because of the way it's handled. Stainless steel contact surfaces, wrapped in the baler, all the different things. What man-made fiber does not have at the end of the day, and we all need to be mindful of this, it doesn't have that feel of cotton. It may feel kind of like cotton, but it doesn't. And so cotton still has that natural, sustainable quality. And so that's why it's important that we keep it as contamination free as possible. Now, these are just some various pictures that I've taken in a gin in South Georgia. The contamination, the pen is for scale, not for, we didn't find this in a module, but you can see the small pieces of contamination and the different types of contamination that you'll see in the gin. You'll see in the lower right, you'll see the wrapped around the module feeder disperser cylinder, these small pieces we looked at before. And then we have this one here, and that is a function. You also have some pieces of that actually have the RFID tag for that module. So at least you know where that contamination came from what field. But those longer pieces that you saw, those streamers, come from a maintenance issue in those round harvesters, and they rip off into streamer type sections that, with longer use, more hours on these harvesters, certain maintenance issues other than your standard consumables come into play. And this pleated corner that you see in that wrap gets hung on a bar inside that picker, and you rip these pieces off and you can see how uniform they are. But the fact that you see 4 on that table tells you that there are issues coming to the gin that are not from handling. And of course, we see damaged wrap, the typical handling systems, how the wrap is cut when it's unloaded, and other things. And of course, we're talking about module wrap. I remind you, that is not the only contamination. As long as there are Walmart bags and wind in West Texas, there will be contamination in cotton fields. And shopping bags and other types of things get into the fields. But the crux of what I'm going to talk about is, what is Viper? And I give Greg Holt of the USDA Gin Lab in Lubbock credit for naming this visual imaging plastic removal. And so that's what we call the trade name of this commercial unit. To give you a little background on it, the USDA ARS proposed research, and Cotton Incorporated funded it, on sorting contamination. And the USDA ARS Gin Lab in Lubbock worked with a company in Indiana called Bratney Companies that does a lot of sortation in the nut industries and soybeans and different types of things to optically detect outlier type colors to eliminate contamination. And so they started working on a system to mount on the feeder apron of the extractor feeder mounted above the gin stand itself. And so their prototype version was put on at Meadow Co-op outside of Lubbock, just south of Lubbock. And then in 2019, Bratney wanted to take this commercial. And so they partnered with Lummus to develop a system to mount and to market to a customer or customers. And the first customer that we sold this to was Southeastern Gin and Peanut, Kent Fountains Gin. Kent is currently the chairman of the National Cotton Council. And we did that and did first testing. The first results in 2019 were presented at the 2020 Beltwide Conference. Then in January, February, we went back to Southeastern and did some more testing. And then in October 2020, a second single Viper system was installed at Spade Co-op Gin on the high plains of Texas outside of Lubbock. And the Southeastern and Spade were evaluated under the similar method. Those results were presented at the 2021 Beltwide Conference. Now, after the beginning of 2021, Bratney lost their main engineer that had worked on this project with us. Gabe Swears moved on to another job, and based on the limited applications of the Viper technology to date, they made the commercial decision to cease their work toward the Viper development. Now, they were gracious enough and they're working with Lummus to transfer their technology, and Lummus will continue as a sole entity the design, developing, and marketing of the Viper system. So the Viper is not going away. Lummus is going to do, and we're going to obviously try to refine the design, take as much cost as we can out of it. It's not an inexpensive technology, but as you'll see, it is effective. Of course, when you do optical sorting, you do either detection or removal, the two basic. It's similar to what John Wanura talked about with the independent systems they put on last year at some gins just to determine if there's a problem. It's kind of like the commercial where the guy's robbing the bank and the people say, do something. And he said, oh, I'm just a security monitor. I'm not a security guard. And so those systems just detected and determined, yes, there is contamination coming down the feeder apron, even in gins that don't think they have a problem. That being the case, the second step is removal. Okay, if you detect it, what can you do to mitigate that contamination? And the feeder apron is one of the best places to do it, albeit not perfect because it does create a certain amount of mess. It is an effective location to do it, although we all know the best way to stop contamination in a cotton gin is to never let it get into the gin itself, because even at the module feeder, it starts to tear the pieces into smaller pieces. You can't get it all. It causes downtime and other adverse reactions. Well, when you go to detect it, we use RGB cameras. There are other systems, but black and white cameras, near infrared and in-gas vision, hyperspectral, all that technical jargon. We use the RGB cameras. And what you want to do is you want to maximize the removal and minimize the collateral removal of good product. You want to blow out the contamination, but not blow out a ton of good cotton in the process. Now, when you go to removal, you've got mechanical diverters, an air knife, which is what we use, or you could have a robot with an arm that goes out. Well, obviously at a feeder apron, if you've ever seen a feeder apron in a cotton gin, the cotton's flowing very fast. These cameras see stuff that the human eye doesn't even see in most cases and react very quickly. So we use the air knife. We won't go into a lot of detail, but what we did is we put cameras across the entire 8-foot feeder apron. So we had 8 cameras across an 8-foot feeder. So we had an overlap. We had about 14 inches of each camera. So we had overlap, and every pixel is determines color. And then you determine software determines good, bad, and good being anything that looks like cotton, or the stainless steel background of the feeder apron so it doesn't sense silver, and then shadows areas untouched by sufficient light to determine the color. And then when those are detected, those air knives, depending on which camera detects it, releases a blast of air to remove the contamination. They set on as early as possible that the contamination could be in the blast zone, and they turn off at the latest possible time. So you do remove some collateral good seed cotton in the process, but it's justified by the importance of removing contamination, because once contamination gets into the saw gin and through the saw gin into the saw type lint cleaners, those are the worst places that the contamination can be chopped into smaller pieces. A saw gin does 2 things very well. It removes the fiber from the seed, which is what Eli Whitney had in mind. And it also grinds big trash into small trash, because you've got 12 or 16 inch saws turning at 800 RPM. And so it chops up big things into small things, and you don't want that contamination to get into that saw gin. Here's a conceptual drawing. You can see the Viper mounted over the feeder apron. This cabinet holds the cameras with the control box. Here's the lower feeder apron. And in this lower feeder apron is where the air jets are located. You can see here's the hole in the box that shows where the camera looks down on the feeder apron. And this opening in the bottom of the feeder apron is where the nozzles blow out across the width of the feeder. This shows Kent Fountain in front of his #1 gin stand. He's got a 3-stand outfit in Surrency, Georgia at Southeastern Gin. And you can see the cabinet with the connecting wires back to. You can see the bright light as it looks down on the feeder apron looking for contamination. Here with the doors open, you can see the 8 camera assemblies with the air purge nozzles to keep the lenses cool and clean. That is one of the most critical aspects. The unfortunate thing about a cotton gin is it's a very dirty, dusty environment. And so that has to be a major consideration with these optical detection systems. You have to have a very clean, dry source of compressed air to keep those cameras cool and clean. And so that is one of the major things we have to take into account when we're designing this system. Now, when it comes to purging the cotton out of the lower feeder apron, that is not as important to have clean air. So what we're looking at doing is having a dedicated smaller source for the cooling and the blowdown of the cameras themselves, and using the gin's compressed air supply or augment that compressed air supply that's typically used in a cotton gin for blowing down things, etc., to purge the contaminated cotton off the bottom of the feeder apron. Here's a close-up of the lens from Bratney. These are packaged in very tight sealed boxes, but you still have to purge them for the dust. Here's your control cabinet. This is the back side of the lower pivoting feeder apron. And you can see these nozzles, and those are what blow the cotton out onto the gin floor. The controls cabinet that has all the brains of the thing is located behind the gin guard on the side of the machine. Here you see the lower pivoting feeder apron. This is the upper part of that. The nozzles are on the opposite side here of this lower feeder apron, and that is what blows the cotton out. This lower feeder apron is what mounts right here on the feeder. And this shows the 3 gins and feeders at Southeastern Gin without the Viper system mounted on it. And then, of course, here at Spade Co-op, the one we tested last fall, this shows the lower feeder apron and the Viper system mounted on it with the controls back behind the gin. John, when you mentioned the monitor systems, here are some of those monitor systems that were just detecting and not removing the cotton mounted at Spade Co-op, and they were at other locations as well. Well, the testing protocol, we're not going to belabor the testing. I'm going to go through this pretty quick. You can look at the recording of this, or if you just really want, you can ask me for a copy of it and I'll send it to you in a PDF format. But we tested 5 different module wrap colors cut into 2x2 squares, did 3 replications per wrap color, and we did 8 injections across the width of the feeder from left to right. In other words, we basically tried to use each camera in the feeder for each feeder that we did. Here are the colors of wrap. Of course, you have the conventional yellow and the breast cancer awareness pink. We have the blue, which was the value wrap from Tama. And then we had 2 different greens. We had a non-tacky opaque, and then we had the tacky translucent color. And so, of course, one of the things when you think about, we talked about yellow having some of the aspects of colors in the cotton spectrum. Obviously, green is another one. Easily seen, easily detected, but the color of green leaf. And when you've got, and we had that at certain times, when you've got a high amount of green leaf, obviously it's not going to know if it's plastic or if it's organic leaf. It's going to see green, it's going to kick it out. So that is one. That and brown is another natural occurring. Those are the reasons those colors are not as desirable. Tama has a patent on a trademark on their yellow color of wrap, so they're going to want to use that, and that has shown to be detectable. But this other color, the value wrap, the way you're using the blue in the Bale wrap is another good idea. Standardize on a color plus or minus certain shade, and that is another detectable color. Here's what the feeder looked like. You saw the photograph at Spade Co-op. We had the Viper unit mounted right here, but we would inject the pieces of contamination into the seed cotton fall area on the upper feeder apron. Of course, your air nozzles right here, and it would blow out, and then we'd have a sheet of plastic or a big board to catch anything that blows out. And we'd have the fire door of the gin open to where we wouldn't actually run if something got by contamination wise. It didn't go into the commercial airstream or ginning stream. We got it collected on the floor, and then we ran it back through the overflow. Here shows an actual system to show you that your government dollars are at work. This is John Wanera of the Lubbock Gin Lab right in there with us working. And I like this picture, and I've got it here because here you see this gentleman had just thrown that piece of green plastic in. It came out and was blown out. And you can see that it has been blown into the air at this point. And we counted and collected what we collected or what ended up on the floor, how many we collected in each of the systems. So we're gonna fly through these results. Basically, you can see for yellow, we captured 12 of 15, pink 13 of 15, the blue and the green non-tacky, we hit all the pieces, all collected. 13 of 15 of the green tacky wrap. All of those, we were hoping for a 75% or better collection efficiency. Any system is not going to be 100% effective. And this is not to say that you put in a Viper system and you're not going to have a contamination problem, because there is contamination in other parts of the gin, and there are opportunities for things to get past even the Viper and end up. And as I our Cotton Council representative said this morning, it's all the ones that aren't caught in the contamination is only called if it's in the sample on the top and bottom of the bale. Throughout that bale, you could have all kinds of other contamination. So we don't need to have a false sense of, oh, well, I caught a bunch of it, I'm not going to have a contamination problem. Until that bale is opened at the mill, there still could be contamination. Looking at the results from January, February at Southeastern, the previous results were from the fall of 2019. We had an overall collection efficiency on the yellow wrap on Gen Line 1 and the pink wrap 95 and 100%. In Gen Line 2, 83.3 and 87.5. And on Gen Line 3, 91% and 83%. The other three colors, you see collection efficiencies all above 80% in every line. Some nearly 100%, 95%. So we were very pleased that the system was working. When we combine the lines, the overall collection efficiency, you see that you had 89.4% either way, whether we looked at it by color or by ginning line. The overall collection efficiency of all 322 captured out of 360 pieces injected. This shows some of the cotton stalk removed. You saw that in John's presentation. In 2019, after the first test, we were all congratulating each other and wrapping up our stuff. And about that time, the feeder apron exploded and this lovely party balloon came out. And so, of course, it had yellow, it had red, it had blue. Thankfully, because the Viper probably didn't detect the silver, because that's the color of the feeder apron. So that is something, party balloons get into fields, and it got through all the pre-cleaning machinery, through the extractor feeder, all the way to the gin stand, and was still this intact, which is pretty amazing, which made it very easy to remove. Southeastern then collected everything they did during the beginning of the season after 35,000 bales. As you can see, yes, there is some yellow module wrap, but look at all the other things that are getting into that gin. Little trinket toy rope, gum wrappers, candy wrappers, everything under the sun. All of that is contamination, and all of that stands in the way of U.S. cotton being the best cotton on the market. So whatever we collect is good. And if we can minimize, here you see some stuff from Spade, the blue Walmart bag, the Huggies diaper wrapper, some pieces of stalk, a spray painted piece of yellow cotton. Don't know if it was sprayed on the side of the module or what. Now, is any system perfect? Of course not. Designed by man, built by man. Man is imperfect, therefore nothing is perfect. But some of the operational issues we talked about, stained cotton, we have to have different settings for the machine. If you've got a lot of stained cotton or green leaf, you're going to have to vary the settings based on the conditions of the cotton. And so as a result, we're going to have to look at doing pre-configured color recognition profiles. In other words, this is good quality white cotton. This is cotton that is tending to be yellow stained, or cotton that tends to be gray, or cotton, if you've got a bunch of green leaf, you obviously want to move. If you're dealing with yellow and pink wrap or possibly blue wrap, not going to be a lot of green wrap on the market. But if you've got those colors, then you can dial out that green from a detection standpoint. We talk about standardization of module wrap colors, blue being one of them, like the new Bale wrap, the 306C Pantone. I know Tama is going to want to utilize their trademark yellow color. It is detectable and it's recognizable. So I'm sure that will be one. The performance standards of tensile strength and how they hold up under ultraviolet, et cetera, are going to be some of the most critical aspects of this system in operation. Another aspect is the gin personnel training. You need to have somebody on staff that is savvy with a computer and that's going to be able to do things like change the profile. We are able to monitor these things remotely through the internet, but This is one of those things, as a gin is focused on putting in contamination detection, they need to be likewise focused on helping to adjust that system and tweak it to where it removes enough cotton, but not too much, and that it's not sensing the wrong colors if there are specific coloration issues in the cotton. Commercial availability. People are going to ask, well, is the Viper for sale? It is. It is a certain amount of limited commercial availability right now because of the transition from Bratney transitioning their stuff. We have not yet set up to build the units, and we're in a learning curve on that. So for this year, we do not have any more available. The ones will run at Southeastern Gin again this year, but we are going to be making a dedicated effort to get that thing designed. It has been designed for the 96-inch wide model 700 Lummus feeders. Those have different vintages, so there's different details. And there are a number of knockoffs of Lummus feeders out on the market from different manufacturers. Those would all need specific tweaking of the mounting and sizes. The next step is to look at the 10-foot wide and 12-foot wide feeders. These present somewhat of a challenge because the larger breadth of the machine, you're going to have a more beefed up cabinet to put those in, and we may want to make those in modular pieces to bolt together. We're looking at the design, especially on the 12-foot, because that's going to have a much more detailed design as far as the ruggedness of the case itself, to keep it from sagging, so you have a consistent width across the machine, and it's not sagging in the middle and getting the cameras too close. But another area that doesn't affect the U.S., certain other parts of the world, Australia, Brazil, and Africa, that they utilize grids over the entrance to the gin stand because of safety measures, and that is going to interfere with the blowout of the seed cotton and contamination, because that grid is going to be right in the line where you're trying to blow that out. So it's not going to do any good to sense the contamination, try to blow it out, and then it get knocked back into the gin stand because of a grid guard that is at the top of the gin. So that's another thing we'll have to work through the details with. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge Cotton Incorporated and the work of the USDA ARS Gin Labs, who've done the pioneering research. Cotton Incorporated funded a lot of this research. Tama and John Deere have been integral. Tama has provided the wrap samples, obviously, because they have a vested interest, as does John Deere, to addressing the issue. They have been very good to work with and very helpful, and continue to be. They've even assisted in the testing. So my hat's off to them. And this multi-company testing team, people from Lummus, the Gin Labs, John Deere, the Southern Southeastern, the USDA Gin Labs, everybody has pulled together as an industry to work on this. And so that has been very gratifying, and one of the reasons that we are as far along. We'd like to be farther along, but all things considered, from prototype work to getting to market, this has been a very fast process as compared to a lot of other industries. And mostly I'd like to thank the two cooperating gins, Southeastern Gin and Peanut, Kent Fountain and his group in Surrency, Georgia, and Spade Co-op Gin in Spade, Texas, Curtis Stewart and his team. They also had to put in a lot of work. They've offered a lot of frank feedback, some of it good, some of it bad, and we appreciate that. But just their willingness to be out on the cutting edge of this has been critical. And that's the only way we're going to solve this, is if we work together. And I'll turn it over to questions. If we got any overall questions from any of the group, or questions for the other guys.
Mr. Rutherford, I am not seeing any questions anywhere.
I think I put them all to sleep.
No, I tell you what, there's lots of great optimistic information that has been brought to us in this session, and again, we're thankful for you being with us. That really good presentation gives us
Thank you.
a lot of insight to what we can see coming down the road. But this is kind of maybe an open question for all of you. And I do not want to take away from the responsibility that each piece of the puzzle from the production through the gin stands or whatever, but with all that optimistic information, do y'all feel pretty confident in a fairly short period of time that we can get the majority of plastics out with the technologies that are coming about?
I think the technology exists, as you can see. I think one of the things is, you know, as I said, it's not inexpensive, and somebody wondered, what does a Viper system cost? They're right now, they're about $45,000 per feeder, and people swallow hard, and good gosh, you know, one of the things we are working on, since Bratney is turning their technology over to us, we're looking at optimization from a manufacturing. Their design is more a prototype, a workable prototype, but it's not inexpensive to build. We're looking at taking cost out of the product by making it more manufacturable, keeping the quality, but just taking the cost, just like in any consumer electronics. But the gins are going to have to, but we're also looking at talking to the mills and the merchants, because the gins and that's one reason Kent Fountain, especially as the chairman of the Cotton Council, has taken such an aggressive lead. He knows that the U.S. needs to be on the leading edge of anybody doing anything with regard to contamination detection and removal. Now, upstream in the gin process, I think the Viper could be utilized depending on the machinery layout of the gin. There's other locations even earlier in the ginning process where it might be applied. And I'll let the other guys talk to some of the other technology they're looking at, but it's ultimately going to have to be commercialized into the gins. The gins and are going to have to see the need, the value, and will have to invest in it. And it will, if they can get some type of incentive, either from the mills, the merchants, or whatever, that I'm a gin using all the best available control technology to battle contamination, then I'm going to get a nod before a gin that is going ostrich and sticking their head in the sand and thinking nothing's wrong. But that's for the market ultimately to determine.
Yeah, Bobby, I might add, to reiterate Ross's comments, it's a systems approach, and it's going to take all segments of the cotton production and processing system to educate their users on the proper use and handling of these modules and the plastic, and really drive home the effect that has on the industry and what impact that's having. I agree with Ross. The technology exists to solve a lot of the problem, but I don't think what we have today is the end all panacea of technology implementation to really address the problem in the ginning process. I think there's additional work that needs to be done there. We've got a great start on it, but hopefully moving forward into the future, we can continue to build on that and continue to get more and more of this plastic out that's causing problems.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree with that. As has been mentioned, no system is 100% effective, and that's really where we need to be. So it's going to take a combination of strategies, and I think a lot of what we've been looking at and what John's been looking at and the other folks at the Gin Labs, are some things that we might be able to retrofit or modify that won't have such a cost basis. But of course, as we heard earlier, there's a penalty even if it's not readily available, whether that's just a discount that everybody in the U.S. gets. So we have to, but whether that's getting some premium from the mills, things like that, there's going to have to be, the economics really make a difference. So.
And certainly we cannot discount the value of education in this process. And I think that's a very key point to keep at the forefront, that, making sure that you're educating your your workers and your gen staff, your managers, everybody involved in the process. That's very important.
It's not unlike safety. It's all about, running a safe ginning environment, being contamination conscious and doing what you can, just being vigilant. Every worker everywhere, if they see something that looks like it's loose or a loose tag on a piece of wrap or something, cut it off to where it's not there. The biggest challenge, like on the module feeder, is the biggest problem. Every module feeder is not designed identical. Every unloading system is unique. Every module is cut differently. Some are done wagon wheel style. Some are done coffee can style. Some are done camelback style. Southeastern uses the little front end loader, and the guys cut it, throw the wrap up on and hook it, and then roll it out, kind of like rolling a bowling ball onto the rollers. That's one of the simplest, least expensive, and in my opinion, as an engineer, one of the most effective ways of not getting contamination. But the reality is there's other types of unwrappers. There's, from simple to complicated. There's all types of systems under the module feeder, whether it's a feed control or whether it's a belt type pickup. Every one of those, if you're going to try to do contamination detection and removal, is going to be a unique design challenge. Can they be done? Absolutely. Are there 5,000 engineers in the ginning industry to do that? No, there aren't. And we work with less people every day. The Gen Labs work, on limited budgets. There's only so much that can be done. But considering those limitations, I think we have made magnificent strides toward addressing it. But education from farmer through the whole process, that is going to be critical.
One last question, unless I see something else, and this may be kind of simple, but I know Dr. Hardin talked about repairing the module if you saw a compromise. Is there a particular recommended way, or is it just duct tape and creativity?
John, do you have I think there are some recommended ways for repairing that. Do you have that information?
I don't have the specific product information. There is a 3M product. It's a spray product that can be used on the outer tail of that module wrap to re-adhere it to the outer layer. Like I said, I can't remember offhand the exact product name, but it is a 3M product. And then there's also a couple of different offerings of tape that works better on the module wrap to help stick it back down. The key thing there is just to make sure that whatever you use will be able to handle the temperature or the cycling of temperature during that storage period. That's one of the things that causes that adhesive to fail. And certainly from a duct tape standpoint, that might limit its application there. So there are some better products to use, and I can get some better information on the actual product names and provide that to you, Bobby.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the Deere or Tama supplies any kind of tape or recommends anything. Then that may be, Deere does have some good information on their website too regarding handling modules. So those sources between Deere and Cotton Incorporated and the National Cotton Council, they do have a lot of that material. The spray adhesive may be like the 3M90, which is kind of the heavy duty outdoor spray adhesive that 3M sells. But yeah, it certainly needs to be some good quality products to maintain that integrity.
One more question just come in. Can we find video somewhere on the different methods of removing wrap from the round module to load onto the module feeder?
I know that Kelly Green has maintained some videos. Tony looked like he was about to say something. So I think on Cotton Ginner's website, he's kind of maintained a collection of those.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
So do we just want to segue into your portion of the program, or you just want to answer this?
Sure. And Kelly Green's probably on here. He may be on here. I'm not sure. we at one time, I guess we still do on our website, started trying to collect all the different ways guys were handling these round modules, feeding them into the gin. And so there should be available on our website access for everyone to go in and look and find that all the different systems we've identified over the year. Now, some of these may no longer be in production, may not be manufactured anymore, but we tried to provide as many solutions as possible to ginners back early on when this was all coming into play with round modules.
I have a clip of the Southeastern gin doing theirs, and I think I've got 2 or 3 other clips, Tony. I will forward those to Kelly, and
okay,
you may want to use those also.
All right, I'll go ahead and lead into kind of my comments and remarks, and a lot of what I'm going to say today has already been said, but again, I'm going to kind of reinforce some of it. You know, I think Ross kind of hit on it. You know, bottom line is we're talking about dollars here, and you know, nothing gets your attention like money. And I think if you look at some of the results of the 2020 crop, take my hat off both you, Bobby, and Jason for a follow-up session this year after your seminar last year. You know, I think that gets attention, and with the discounts that have come into play on the loan, as well as out in the marketplace itself, as Dr. John Robinson pointed out, I think all of that, you know, money gets your attention, and I think that's what we're seeing, that we're starting to pay a little more attention to both at the grower level as well as the gin level and trying to prevent contamination. You know, the results are at least promising in the Corpus Christi office over the prior year, and hopefully we'll continue to see gains in the future. You know, ginners continue to gain a lot of knowledge in handling these round modules, and hopefully we're putting that knowledge in the book, and it'll continue to grow over time. Knowledge that we can spread and share amongst our industry on how we can better prevent plastic contamination. You know, education is the key to prevention. We just can't inform enough on education. A lot of this stuff is common sense. You know, things that you do will have a great impact on what might be the end result of contamination in that bale. You know, while education is a key part of it, you also got to have communication and you got to have training. I think Dr. Hardin put that in there. Same with Dr. Wanera. It is very, very important that you communicate and you train your employees, because as ginners, we have a responsibility with our grower customers to try and do everything we can and educate them on this issue and the importance of doing a good job out in the field. Because if they bring plastic to us in that round module, we are very limited on what we can do to get that plastic out today. Now, there's some promise on the way. Ross covered their system they have. Maybe there's other things that are going to develop. Maybe we're not at that final end point by any means, but at least we've got something starting down the pathway of trying to have an in-process system at the gin to remove plastic. So gins have a responsibility to try to educate their growers. I know some gins are doing a good job. They bring their growers in, they feed them a lunch maybe, and they go over and have someone speak to them and talk to them. There's a lot of resources out there that you can call upon for the National Cotton Council, Texas Cotton Ginners Association, other industry people that would be glad to try to help you in putting something together to educate your growers on the importance of doing this. But then they have to take that message back to the operator of that machine. If they're not emphasizing the operator of that machine, if they're not making sure that equipment's not operated properly, it doesn't do any good. If you just tell him something and he doesn't carry that on down the line, we're not getting that message across, and we're not getting the importance of eliminating this plastic out in the field. You know, harvesting is one thing with your equipment, but there's also things dealing with staging out the field and moving the mulch modules around and staging it for the gin to pick up. You got to make sure that wherever you're deciding to put that module, that, you know, it's not going to get punctured. And I know, you know, I see a lot of guys in South Texas, they shred the stalks and set cotton right on those stalks, and those stalks are about 1 inch in diameter a lot of times, and they puncture that module on the bottom. But then I'm torn again because, well, if you just set them on stalks and you don't have a place to set them, you don't have a turned row or anywhere else, maybe that's something you need to think about in the future, is leaving an area where you don't have cotton so that you can put these round modules. I know in West Texas, there's a lot of turn rows, and I know in South Texas, there's not many turn rows. So it's just something to think about. But stacking them on stalks that are not shredded creates a problem when they try to pick them up a lot of times. So there's issues all the way around. You just got to plan for the future and plan in advance to try to eliminate any plastic contamination. Like I said, you need to stage them in an accessible area where the module trucks can get into, or the trucks and trailers can get into, the loaders. Make sure it's not in an area that's low lying where they're going to get standing water if you have a big rainstorm or whatever. So it's very important that you do this out in the field. Also, I know that there's other plastic contamination that can get in these fields, out on the very edge of these fields. It's probably not practical for these guys to walk down through there before harvest and try to remove all that plastic. But if a guy's in a harvester and he sees a big old huge piece of plastic 4 or 5 feet in size, he needs to get out, go pull that out of the way, put it in the vehicle with him, and make sure that you're not harvesting at least that big piece of plastic out there. When it comes to transporting and handling with the gin, there's a lot of important things. I think Bobby touched on it. You got to have the proper lugs on your chains. You can't be using the old aggressive lugs that used to be used for conventional modules. You need to make sure those round modules are lined up straight out in the field. If they're not, if one's off a little bit, you have the potential for it rubbing against the side of that module truck. Size matters with the module truck. If you're going to make these big, huge modules and you're going to use a low value wrap, a low quality wrap, not a premium wrap, they're going to squat more. And when they squat more, they're going to be more subject to rubbing against the side of the module truck and tearing. So these are all things that have to be thought of in advance. You know, if you need to think about how the gin's going to pick up your modules out there. Is the gin going to pick them up with a module truck? You know, these producers ought to know this. Are they going to pick it up with a module truck? Or are they going to pick it up with a trailer and a loader? You know, here again, if they're going to pick up with a trailer loader, you might be able to make your modules a little bit larger. But if they're going to pick up with a module truck, you might want to make sure that they're a little smaller or whatever. These are all things that need to be thought of in advance and planned for. You know, it's very important to educate custom harvesters as well. I know custom harvesters are in there their goal is to harvest as many pounds as they can, as quick as they can, and move on down the road. But you've got to educate them as well in this whole process. Certainly with John Deere's new harvesters, they're going to be heavier and denser. So you got to be thinking about the weight issue there somewhat. And then also you got to make sure that if you are harvesting with a module truck or transporting with a module truck to the gin, you got to make sure, as Bobby said, that your ground speed is matching your chain speed. Because if it's too slow, you'll get bunching. If it's too fast, you'll get tugging and pulling. And so that can cause a tear on the bottom of that round module. Certainly one of the worst problems we have are broken modules and busted modules. They're very difficult to try to gather those up, whether on the gin yard or out in the field, without having some type of contamination ultimately in the gin. One thing the gin might consider is trying to gin all the busted modules at the end of the season, putting them back, and maybe it penalizes that producer some, but then maybe that's part of the responsibility that they have. Certainly flatbeds or other trailers, you got to make sure you have the proper equipment to load them and unload them. And it's very important that you have a skilled operator at both the field and the gin to prevent the tearing of that wrap and to keep from dragging on the ground. If that round module is getting dragged right along the ground or across the field and it's got stalks that's dragging on the bottom of it, as Bobby pointed out in his presentation, they're going to be very subject to being torn on the bottom side of that. When it gets to the gin, the thing is to try to have a system in place where you handle that cotton as little as possible. I know you got to pick it up from the field, move it to the gin yard, and the gin yard into the gin. If there's any other process in there you have to do, then you probably ought to look at that and try to eliminate that, because the less we handle it, the less we move it, the better off we are. We're less likely to have contamination. When it gets to feeding into the gin, this is the most critical step for prevention. You need skilled and educated employees on the module feeder, know that they've got to remove all the plastic wrap, that they've got to look for all the pieces of plastic that might be in that module, because what gets through here is difficult to remove. I think we all see that today from these presentations. The bottom line is this is the front line. This is the front line for preventing plastic contamination. I know a lot of times it's hard to get good skilled employees, hard to find workers out there, but this is a very critical area where you need to put some good quality people on. You can't put your worst employees working at the module feeder. You got to put guys working on the module field that care about their job and care about what they're doing, and that they're going to do a good job at it. There's a lot of safety issues involved with getting this plastic out of these round modules. I can tell you, we've had people jump on a roller bed to get a piece of plastic out, and they end up losing a foot in the process when it's all said and done. So there's a lot of safety issues out there, as one can expect around a cotton gin from trying to get all this plastic contamination out. They covered the cameras on the module feeders. That's a good low-cost solution to help give you information and provide information what might be going on, what's happening there as on the disperser cylinders as it's coming into the gin. Certainly you need to clean off that plastic if it gets on there, but I know you can't be shutting down all the time to do that. But you know, any plastic gets on there is going to just get chopped up in smaller pieces and get taken on down the line. You know, if you do have a downtime, you ought to be checking some of your pre-cleaning equipment, looking at seeing what it's like. You know, look at your cleaners and pre-cleaners up to the module, to the feeder, and see what kind of plastic you might have on those. If you do have plastic on it, it needs to be removed. However, I want to put my safety hat on here and make sure that don't forget lockout, tag out, because we've had people that get into that equipment, somebody doesn't know they're up there, they start the gin back up, and then processes it, they get injured. So make sure you always remember lockout, tag out, you get into any pre-cleaning equipment that's higher up in the gin or away from where ginners are at. Bottom line is you need to educate all employees on the contamination issue. But again, the module feeder employees are the frontline people, and those are the ones that need to be most on guard and most educated and most knowledgeable to prevent contamination. Certainly loan discounts are heavier this year as we look at 31 plus points. Marketplace, Dr. Robinson talked some about it. You know, some guys are able to market that cotton that has a 71 or 72 and maybe get a decent price for it. Don't get the kind of discount in the loan, but still, you're probably going to get less for it than you would if you did not have that contamination by all means. And it's bottom line, it's more than the grower the gin can really afford, and we need to do everything we can to try and keep from having any 71 or 72 calls. One of the things I would encourage the ginners is if you are having quite a few 71 or 72 calls, if you look at what you had last year, what you had the year before, you know, what you may have this coming season or whatever, if you're having many of them, you know, you need to thoroughly evaluate your handling and process of transporting, handling, and feeding these modules into the gin. One consideration you might do is to possibly reach out to someone in the industry, whether it's our organization, maybe one of these researchers, or somebody else out there, to come in and take a look at your gin and look at your operation, because though you may think you're doing everything you can, there may be some other things that you can do, and maybe having an outside fresh person look at it might give you some new perspective on this. The bottom line is, and what I'm finishing up here is, this is a problem that all of us can do something about. Yeah, we're not going to eliminate 100% of it, but we will get a large percentage of it if we just do some common sense things, educate our employees, make sure they're aware of what they got to do and how important this issue is for us. Number one, we don't want to have 71s or 72s at the gin. You don't want to have that. But the bottom line is we don't want to lose our market either and develop a reputation as being a contaminated source of cotton in the world. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions. I appreciate the time. Appreciate you guys doing this once again. I think this is a problem that we can do a lot about with just education and common sense, but we got to communicate and we got to train our employees to accomplish that.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. With that, if there are no other questions, just wanted to read some comments that Ed Barnes made. He shared a link, and I've gone ahead and shared that with everyone. But he made some comments, and I don't know that it went out to the whole audience. He said from this site, significant wrap tears must be repaired in the field before module trucks pick up to prevent further wrap damage and ginner problems. Recommended repair tapes are Catec 277 and Barry 5400. Says loose outer tails must be secured with 3M90 spray adhesive or lint bale repair tape before being retrieved by the module trucks or buggies to prevent subsequent module damage and cotton ginning difficulties. So I appreciate him sharing that information in chat and wanted to pass that on to the broader audiences as well. With that, greatly appreciate everybody participating in today's program, and especially want to thank all of our speakers once again. Thank you very much for being a part of this program. We think that it's an important issue that continues to be a challenge for the cotton industry, and so we greatly appreciate everybody taking the time to share their knowledge and the participants for being able to gather some information as well on ways that we can help in combating the issue. We do have a little bit of an evaluation that we'd greatly appreciate y'all completing for us. If you want to use your smart device and use that QR code, you can click on, or take a picture of that, and it'll pop up there and you can complete that evaluation. Alternatively, I did put a link in the text chat as well. It's the AgriLife.az1 Qualtrics.com link there that's in your text chat. And if you would, we'd greatly appreciate you taking the time to complete that. Unfortunately, we don't have any CEU certificates or any carrots at the back end of that to share with you, but we do value your input on this program and appreciate your guidance. So again, thank everybody for participating, and look forward to seeing you at future programs.